There are some restaurants here in Toledo that do it.
Costco. We are good.
Costco.
The time is now 1:01. The chair calls to order the October 23rd meeting of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. Thank you everyone for your attendance today. In your materials, you have today's agenda and you have the minutes from our meeting on September 25th. If everyone has had a chance to review, can anyone identify any corrections that need to be made to either the agenda or minutes as written?
I can, but I don't know that I can unmute him. Okay.
Yeah, Jerry, you might try and mute yourself.
That was at the go. That was at the go. To go. Not yet.
If there are no corrections, can I get a motion to approve? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? All in favor of approving the motion to approve the minutes and agenda as written signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Okay.
I would say mute him and then he can always go back. Okay. Turning to the agenda, we'll begin with an executive director's report, which includes legislative recommendations. Director Scoglin.
Yep. So first I will note, Commissioner Helmer, we did mute you by request of the chair. If you want to be unmuted, I cannot force unmute you. You should be able to do it from your phone, but if you can't, you can disconnect and reconnect. Draft legislative recommendations. We are directed by statute. This is all for what's going to go in the annual report, which we will review the entire annual report for approval in the November meeting. Now, what this is really is just a first look at this so we can have some feedback, some discussion about these issues to see what kinds of things the commission is interested in changing as well in terms of recommendations to make to the legislature. These recommendations this year are the same as the ones last year. So those of you who were here last year, we've talked about them before. We've had obviously a lot of time to look at them. They are the same ones they have last year. I will note that there's a line here that says due to litigation regarding certain aspects of the Kansas Campaign Finance Act, the commission is not taking a formal position regarding some potential legislative changes, but that should not imply generalized support of or opposition to potential legislative changes not included within these recommendations. So we can talk about that in an attorney-client executive session if you would like, but that's why this does not include some of the other issues that you might think of. I'll talk through these real quick. And again, we're not looking for formal approval today. I'm just looking for feedback and thoughts. If there are other things people want to talk about, it's great. Just let me know and we'll have that discussion. The actual formal approval of the legislative recommendations will occur with the annual report at the November meeting. So I'll talk through the 5 recommendations. I'll try to be efficient, especially because I know some of you have heard this before, but I also know some of you have never heard any of these. So I'll try to walk that line between those. But if you have questions at the end, please let me know and we'll talk through them. First is mandatory electronic filing. Right now, all statewide candidates, so the 5 statewide offices, they have had to file electronically for about 15 years, but all other state and local candidates can either file electronically or on paper. Paper filing drastically slows down the process to the point where reviews are much slower. It's a lot slower to get information to the public. It's a lot slower of a process and creates both costs and increases the amount of work that is done in terms of the day-to-day. So if we have electronic filing for state candidates, like 43 states that already require this, then we would be able to reduce that kind of extra work burden. We would be able to decrease costs and we'd be able to increase both the accuracy and the transparency of the data that we are presenting to the public. Now, this would also include a granting of exemptions because, frankly, there are still some people who might run for office who do not have reliable access to internet. That is still a problem in 2024 that we definitely recognize. And we can grant those exemptions very easily if needed. But then that would be the exception, not the rule. The second is the kind of large ethics cleanup mega bill. This has basically all of the little items that are not likely to be particularly controversial. There are things about removing extraneous text that shouldn't have been left in when something was changed, resolving some conflicts in law that happened when certain statutes were updated. I'll go through just a few. The first one is requiring email addresses. It's 2024. We can, or I guess this will be 2025. There's little reason to not have access to an email address that we can try to reach people on. People can still write in that they don't have one, which is fine. But requiring some sort of email address contact allows us to reach out to these people. This prevents a lot of failure to file issues if we can get ahead of it. We call, we send mail because we're required to send mail. Obviously, the postal service is not always the quickest. The third one there is paid for attribution on social media. This changes the requirement so the paid for does not appear at the end of the item. It just appears in a clear and conspicuous place, which is the trend that's occurring in electronic communication right now. Clear and conspicuous then gets defined, can be defined in reg. But this basically means that in something like Facebook, which scrolls backward forever, there is no end to the page. So where would you put the paid for attribution? So this way the statute is written, it needs some update or correction. There's some clarity for affidavits of exemption. People who don't raise or expend more than $1,000 don't file reports. They file this affidavit of exemption. This clarifies the time frame that it would apply to. It also updates the statutory conflict that occurred quite a while back in 2015. There's some extraneous text. There's a procedural unintended consequence. We've already fixed the requirement that a hearing is fixed within 30 days after probable cause is found on a complaint. It's already been fixed in the Campaign Finance Act. We're just recommending that the same fix be applied to the ethics law. Lobbyists can register on paper, but they are required to complete all reports electronically. There's no reason to allow them to register on paper in that instance. And finally, there's a statutory conflict relating to when civil penalties initiate for lobbyists and statement of substantial interest filers. Again, none of those particularly controversial. The third item is support of federal candidates. Right now, Kansas campaign finance law has an extremely strict prohibition in the Campaign Finance Act that does not have any exemptions written in. It says that any political funds collected and were subject to the reporting requirements of the Act shall not be used in or for the campaign of a candidate for a federal elective office. This applies to not just candidates, which already are prohibited from doing that through a different statute. It applies to party committees. It applies to central committees. It applies to PACs. So if a county party central committee simply wants to purchase signs for their federal candidates, they cannot do that legally right now. And I will tell you, it creates a lot of problems. It's also the way it's written. It also creates a lot of problems in trying to walk the prohibition back or try to fix an issue that occurred if they've already purchased signs, which happens. There's really not a reason to prohibit, in our view anyway, there's not really a reason to prohibit PACs and parties from engaging in that kind of practice. And this was never a prohibition the commission asked for in the first place. 4 is required account termination. Right now, candidates, when they open a campaign account, they can keep it open forever, but they have to file reports every single January. This means that we have some campaign accounts that are well in excess of 30 years old in Kansas, and they just file a report in January. I have no idea if that money is still actually in these accounts, but if we tried to audit those accounts, I think that would be difficult. They probably have not updated their statement or their appointment of treasurers. They may not live where they originally said they lived or have the same contact information. We may never find them. And 2, if they were trying to close out their account, I don't know how you audit a 30-year-old bank account. The banks don't keep that information that long. So this creates a lot of issues, and candidates frankly need this assistance so that they can close down their accounts. They can always make a new account later on. This recommendation is to allow for 6 years after their most recent term of office or the date that of the election where they last filed as a candidate. Missouri, Oklahoma, both have different requirements for closure of accounts. Missouri requires closure within 30 days, which seems very quick. Oklahoma has a staggered period. I don't see any reason we don't need any of that in Kansas. I don't think 6 years seems pretty permissive, but if the legislature wants to change it, it's fine with, as far as I'm concerned, I'm fine with it. There just needs to be some time at which these are finally terminated so we can help them resolve their accounts. And last, we've talked, this one actually came about from a fine hearing that the commission held where PACs right now, if a candidate has a issue filing their report, both the candidate and the treasurer for the candidate are liable for making sure that report is filed and accurate. But for a PAC or a party committee, that's not true. It's only treasurers. Everyone who's looked at this seems to believe, and I don't see any reason to disbelieve this, that this was a drafting oversight, that it was intended to include chair people as well, but it simply did not, the way the statute is written. So this would make their chair people also responsible for report filing. We have a lot of situations where someone is a treasurer in name only, or for some reason they're signed on as a treasurer, but they don't have access to the bank account. Now that's not a good idea in the first place, because they've exposed themselves to a lot of liability and no ability to control the actual conduct that underlies that liability, which is a big problem. But allowing chair people to be responsible for this as well corrects that issue as well. So those are the 5 recommendations that I have. They're the same ones as last year. Again, any questions or other thoughts?
I have a question that's just adjacent to the legislative effort that we're making, and it goes back to something we've discussed in the past regarding revisiting the regulations for the commission. What is our best current guidance about how we could go about that process?
We can initiate the regulatory review process, and we did have some turnover after we appointed the subcommittees,
Yes.
which created some difficulty in trying to initiate that process. But we want to make sure that we are furthering and processing these regulatory changes. There are some that, frankly, I would like to push out very soon, but we need the commission's subcommittees to meet on this. So, but yes, there's nothing that stops us from engaging in regulatory review and regulatory reform.
I will say some of the like substantive stuff, though, if we are going to ask for legislative change, it would make sense to wait for some of the
until
substantive
after.
regs. Yeah, I know we were doing procedural as well, but
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. When we did have the most recent legislative change, there was one requirement that we
Yes.
were required to create a regulation to address conflicts of interest.
Recusal, yes.
And I mean, even if we just focused on that issue, is that something that we could do prior to a legislative enactment of some kind? Or do we have a timetable on when we would go about trying to enact a regulation that way?
It's our intention that we have that meeting, that we start having meetings about the recusal regulation, and we actually push forward a regulation fairly shortly. I want this on the books as quickly as we can have it. I think that it's important to have generally, and also there's a legislative mandate that we need to have this regulation on the books.
Referencing, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. If I make one correction to that, I know that the subcommittee had met March, April time period, maybe early May. And the representation from staff was that in May, they would circulate their vision of what changes they wanted. So we've just been waiting on that initial draft before we start our open subcommittee meetings.
yes,
Makes sense.
absolutely.
With respect to the conflict of interest and recusal, just even looking at let's say the 43 states that you kind of referenced in the legislative update, do we have an example of anything that we can consider at least relatively soon that is like an analog from other states that we could just discuss in like an upcoming meeting?
Yes, so the draft of the recusal regulation that we've workshopped includes both input from other states that have recusal regulations and also other state agencies that have recusal regulations. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, essentially.
Sure. That was the one thing that I thought to ask about. So we can expect to see something in the near future then?
Shortly. I will say that ongoing, we obviously have a very small staff.
Sure.
Litigation has taken a lot of the time in the office, which slows down everything.
Okay.
But this is a major priority.
Okay.
And I want to get this out as quickly as we can.
Great. Do any other commissioners have questions about the legislative update?
Maybe just one high level. What is the nature of the interaction between the commission and the legislature just generally? Can you speak to how that process works? Any restrictions on communications with legislators? when and how you guys get wind of legislation that might be coming down the pike that is pertinent to the commission? Can you just give us kind of a primer on how that all works in practice?
Sure, that's a great question. So we will, on these legislative recommendations, we often draft something and send it to the revisers. Usually a legislator will sponsor the bill so that they'll actually start holding hearings on the legislative recommendations. In terms of other bills, it really depends. In scenarios in which the bill is designed to not be particularly friendly to the commission and they are not seeking our input, we won't hear about it until it's introduced. Most of the time, though, people are looking to operate cooperatively with us because campaign finance and ethics laws are our bread and butter. It's what we do every day. So usually they want our input in trying to update and fix these laws or try to create certain improvements. So normally they're reaching out to us before a bill is ever filed to discuss the actual language. But I'm usually in the loop on when a bill is introduced that affects us. It usually only occurs in one of 4 committees, and those committees typically are reaching out to us for either at minimum a fiscal note or some other impact or discussion on the language.
You said 4 committees, is that 2 in the House and 2 in the Senate?
Yes,
Got it.
usually.
When you said that there are certain things that were unfriendly toward the commission, what do you mean?
There have been instances in which a bill has been introduced that was not designed to, in my view, it was not designed to assist in making the laws any better. It was designed to undermine the commission and the laws that we have jurisdiction over. And so we were not included in the drafting of that language at all. And in fact, that bill was introduced and the revisers would not give me a copy of it until quite a bit after introduction, which is also atypical. I won't say now that normally is not how our interactions with the legislature go. That happened in one very specific instance.
Yeah, and Commissioner Jackson, my perhaps individual take on all this is, I think it's very awkward for us as an organization that oversees all the individuals who are over in that house to have any lobbying or communicative role with them. So I've always found that to be, I won't say completely inappropriate, but certainly creates awkward situations.
The statute that creates our annual report does statutorily direct the commission to make legislative recommendations.
For the recommendations, correct. I thought his question had to do with more of a lobbying effort.
Yeah, that was, I think, sort of part of my question. And Commissioner Berger, if I understood what you're saying, it's sort of the awkwardness is like we're the fox guarding the hen house, so to speak. Is that what you mean?
I'm not sure who the fox is here, but yes, we might be the hens. I don't know.
The commission, if I'm understanding sort of your comment about the awkwardness, the commission has the oversight authority of those elected officials and the campaigns that they run. Therefore, maybe there's some awkwardness in the commission engaging with those same people on the laws that we would be enforcing against them in some respect. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that again might just be my individual perspective, but that's what I said.
All right, any other questions? It's helpful clarity. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have some civil penalty assessments to just note for the record. Director Skoglund, can you speak to these?
Sure. There's a few central committees for the July receipts and expenditures report. There's one lobbyist for the September employment and expenditures report, and that's it.
Okay, and then the next item on the agenda are civil penalty waiver requests. Again, Director Skoglund, do you want to speak to these?
Sure. The first one is Christopher Breeden. You have the materials that they provided. They've identified a category of good cause as medical circumstances. This person was assessed $200. The report was originally due on July 29th, and the report was received on September 13th. They included some supplemental documents, and I noted in the office use box that this is Mr. Breeden's first civil penalty, and after review of the waiver request, I support the waiver in full. I believe this is the type of circumstance that the medical exemption was designed for.
We require an action to approve the waiver request, correct?
Yes.
And is there any reason to think that it makes sense to group this with the other civil penalty waiver request, or should we just handle them in isolation?
The other one is very different, so
Okay.
I would handle them separately.
Okay,
I'm not a big fan of the medical exemption, certainly of other family members, but holy smoke, this fella seems like he was properly focused on things other than the commission and his obligations toward the commission. So I'd actually move that we waive it in full.
motion has been made to waive and it has been seconded. Is there any additional discussion?
Is the medical exemption, is this time for discussion?
Oh, sure.
Is that by statute or regulation? Where does that exist?
It is, so the commission can waive any civil penalty for good cause. The commission has established a guidance document that identifies that there are 4 categories of good cause, because previously there were no categories and anyone could identify whatever they thought would justify good cause. The commission had a subcommittee that, after extensive work, devised these 4: medical circumstances, financial hardship, natural disaster or theft that makes filing impossible, or other unique circumstances that didn't arise from delay, the filer's delay or negligence.
Got it.
Those were in a guidance document. The commission can depart from those 4, but the commission just has to create justification for departing from that, or eliminate the guidance document.
Got it. Thanks.
Well, the motion has been seconded. Is there any additional discussion? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion to waive in full signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The motion passes.
What should we do with Jerry?
Oh, yeah. He's still muted.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Jerry,
Helmer, if you can hear us and you cannot unmute yourself, I would suggest you leave and rejoin.
Blink once if you can.
So maybe I'd just put him down as an abstention till we can figure out the voting.
Sure. And do we have enough votes then?
You would have,
Oh,
We need
you have
5.
5?
We need
Okay.
5.
okay. And then as an abstention, he goes with the majority, technically.
Okay. So then you would say that it passes?
I think it
If
did.
all 5 voting members voted for it, it would
Okay.
pass.
Sure. Well, then the motion passes. And do you have a way of
Sam there?
disconnecting?
I can remove
Yeah.
him
Okay.
and see if he will reconnect.
I mean, if he's not responding, I would say
There we
do
go.
that, and then that. at
You're
least
looking for
solves
you.
the problem.
Commissioner Helmer, we're going to try to remove you so you can rejoin so that we can fix your microphone. I actually can't remove him.
Okay. Well,
Well. There you go. No? Yes.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh,
Oh, he's on there twice.
Yes, but I'll remove the one that's muted.
All right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Helmer, can you hear us?
I can.
Great.
Oh,
Excellent.
perfect.
Do you want to vote on the previous waiver request?
My vote was a yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, the next civil penalty waiver request involves a Brenda Holiday Stanton.
Yes, Ms. Holiday Stanton was a treasurer for a central committee. She was assessed $150. The original report was due in July 29th. It was received on September 9th, and she received a $150 penalty. She identifies the other unique circumstances catch-all. And you can see her explanation that she wrote there, as well as her supplemental materials. I do not have a recommendation with this one, and I'll explain why. This is her first civil penalty, and it is absolutely unambiguous, I think, that she internally expressed her resignation. Legally, that resignation is not effective unless she submits something in writing to the commission, or the entity files a new statement of organization or appointment of treasurer. They did not do that. And we received nothing in writing from her either. She did resign internally, that's clear. So legally, she's the only person who could be responsible for this report. So I would say that I understand the situation, even though she did not submit it to us properly. However, I will note also the postal service tracking info shows that the failure to file notice was delivered on August 14th, and she didn't actually contact us until September 6th. Had she contacted us when she received the notice, there wouldn't have been a penalty at all. So again, I understand the situation. There's probably some confusion in terms of she thought she had resigned. She probably doesn't know why she was receiving that. But perhaps she should have called us first as well. So I have no recommendation, and I think the commission hasn't dealt with a lot of these situations since the guidance report, where someone believes they have resigned, they never actually resigned with us.
Couple questions on that. With these reports, the chairperson is also responsible for making it go. If there's a treasurer, then it falls on the treasurer unless there's no treasurer.
If there is no treasurer, the chairperson becomes responsible because they become the treasurer. But otherwise, so if she had submitted her resignation to us before that deadline, the chair would have been responsible. That's true.
And so notice was only sent to her then as the treasurer.
Yes, I think that we sometimes will send notices to the chairperson, but I don't know in this instance. Since the treasurer is the one legally responsible for it, she's the one who receives the failure to file that set off a civil penalty.
So we have the report now.
We do. And I believe there wasn't a lot of activity on it, but I don't recall for sure.
I move that we approve the waiver in full.
Second.
Motion has been seconded to approve the full waiver. The amount at issue is $150, if I'm correct. Is there any additional discussion, or do any commissioners have any other questions or comments?
Just as general discussion, I'm sympathetic, but I don't want to get involved in whatever internal machinations exist within parties, committees, campaigns, etc. For that'll be a never-ending explanation or excuse. So I will not be in favor.
So when
That's a good
somebody is
point.
required to submit in writing, they are able to do that through electronic mail.
Yes,
And so this email that she has from May 28th, saying that she resigns her position, that the mistake is that she perhaps didn't copy the Ethics Commission.
that's exactly correct.
And
the
if she
moment-
had, that would have been the difference.
Yes. And in fact, the moment she sent it to us, she became resigned.
Okay. And so, okay. So there's evidence, there's, for whatever it's worth, that she had intent to resign her position at an earlier point in time.
Yes.
Okay, well, the motion has been seconded to a full waiver. Is there any additional discussion or questions?
Maybe just one quick clarification. So when was the report due that she didn't? July 29th?
Yes.
And from this email we have, just internally, it didn't include the Ethics Commission, but on May 28th, she resigned her position internally.
Correct.
So about 2 months before the report would have been due.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, probably increased her confusion as to why she was getting the letter too.
Yes.
Okay, well, we will take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion to waive in full, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The
Nay.
motion passes.
Nay.
Noted. We have two.
2 nays. Were there 2 nays? We need 5 to approve.
Yes, we need 5 to approve. It has to be a majority of the commission.
Well, it needs to be, yeah, 5 votes total.
So
that fails.
with it, so it failed. Okay.
Is it 4 to 2?
You need 5 votes to approve an action of the commission.
Okay, well, we will move on. The next item on the agenda are civil fine hearings, and we have 2. The time is exactly 1:30.
The respondent is here.
I would note were there other motions on that penalty waiver that might
Oh, that's a good.
reach 5 votes?
That's a good point.
Again, I don't have a recommendation on this, but there were 4 votes on it, so I just want to see.
Given the failure of the motion to approve the waiver in full, perhaps do any of our nay votes wish to make an alternate motion of any kind? Okay, we will move on. Thank you, Director Scobland. We will begin with civil fine hearings involving complaint 750. And Commissioner Jackson will be serving as the hearing officer in that matter. And so I will hand the gavel over to Commissioner Jackson. And feel free to proceed when you're ready.
And procedurally speaking, I know there was some discussion before things started as to oaths and administration of oaths. Will all people who are providing testimony be put under oath?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And it's my understanding, Commissioner Berger, that the respondent is representing himself. So there should be no distinction between counsel's arguments versus his testimony. I think any comments from the respondent will be entirely under oath. Is that your understanding, Mr. Burris? Yeah, that's what I understood.
Except for open statement. Absolutely. Otherwise, it would sort of just like this, and then I'm gonna have, yeah.
He's crossing the street. He was on.
And this is the respondent?
Yes,
He's not in the room yet?
Not yet.
Okay,
he was in the building though. That's why I stepped out a few moments ago.
gotcha.
We're just gonna let you sit wherever you're most comfortable here. Mark and I are seated here.
Sure.
Hello.
Hi.
It's all right.
That's that's where you sat before, I think, so.
Going, just so I don't butcher your name, you pronounce it Kuchera or Kuchera?
Sarah.
That's what I thought.
Nice.
Great.
How'd you know that?
I think I heard Kate say it. Okay. Are we good to proceed? Any objections?
Yeah, record this.
You may, it's also being recorded on YouTube, so you can find it that way as well.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Bo Jackson, and I have been appointed as the presiding officer before the Campus Governmental Ethics Commission in the matter of Mark Scoglin, Executive Director of the Commission, versus the respondent, Patrick Kuchera. I hereby call this hearing to order. Would the parties please enter their appearances, beginning with the complainant?
Yes, Caitlin Bull Stewart on behalf of the complainant, Mark Scoglin, Executive Director. Mark Scoglin, Executive Director, also appears as witness.
And for the respondent?
Patrick, sure.
Thank you both. This matter is a complaint hearing before the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. The applicable burden of proof is that the affirmative findings of fact by the commission shall be based on clear and convincing evidence. Any objection to me as the presiding officer providing a brief procedural summary of the next steps? Okay. This hearing is being recorded. Therefore, responses to questions must be available, as the audio-video recorder does not pick up on nods, unclear responses, or other gestures. So just like a deposition or if we were in court. The complainant, the commission will be providing an opening statement. Kuchera, as the respondent, may also choose to provide an opening statement after the complainant's opening statement, or may reserve his opening statement until after the complainant has presented its evidence. The complainant will present evidence subject to cross-examination where appropriate. The commission is not bound by technical rules of evidence. Commissioners, we have some here in the room, and we have two participating virtually on the screen there. May ask questions during each side's presentation of the evidence, subject to my discretion as the presiding officer. Mr. Kuchera, as the respondent, may provide an opening statement after the complainant, as noted. He may also present evidence subject to questions by the commissioners and subject to cross-examination where appropriate. After each side's presentation of evidence, the complainant will provide a closing statement. Mr. Kuchera, as the respondent, may also provide a closing statement after the complainant. After any closing statements, the commission shall deliberate, and we will issue an order within 30 days, including findings of fact, including the law. As the presiding officer, I may allow the parties to submit proposed orders within 7 days of this hearing. If appropriate, as the presiding officer, I may keep this hearing open and allow the parties to submit briefing within 30 days of this hearing. Commission will meet as soon as practicable after the submission of any such briefs in order to further deliberate.
Excuse me. Can I ask a question? Can you repeat that? Something was in 7 days, proposed orders, and what was it for the 30 days?
Yes, as presiding officer, I may allow the parties to submit proposed orders within 7 days of today.
Mm-hmm.
And I may also keep this hearing open and allow the parties to submit briefing within 30 days of today. So 7 days for a proposed order, 30 days for substantive briefs.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, I think we would proceed to the complainant's opening statement.
Absolutely. The only issue in this instance, may I proceed respectfully? Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. The only issue here today for liability, it's been narrowed down to the payment that Mr. Kuchera made to Ms. Wrights and whether or not that payment was connected to the campaign or not. Not a single person in this room has said there is a campaign connection. The evidence will show there was no campaign connection, and Mr. Kuchera was using his campaign account in this instance, at least for these transactions, as a slush fund to pay off personal business debts in violation of KSA 25-4157A. The parties have entered some factual stipulations into the record already to streamline this proceeding for everyone. We agree, Mr. Kuchera and the complainant agree that he was a candidate for governor in the 2018 election cycle and that he is a resident of the state. So jurisdiction is clear for the commissioners. Happy to answer more questions if that comes up. We agree that Mr. Kuchera made two transfers, one of $9,510 and one of $1,325.62 of contribution funds from his campaign account to transfer a total of $10,835.62 in contribution funds to Ms. Wrights. The only thing that's left, the only door left to close, is what those funds were used for. Today, Mr. Kuchera will tell you that he does not know what those contributions funds were used for when he paid them to Ms. Wrights. This tracks with his sworn deposition testimony and the story he has been telling throughout. However, we will bring Ms. Wrights in as our witness today. And Ms. Wrights will tell you that she does know what the funds were used for. And those funds were used to pay Ms. Wrights back for various loans she took out for Mr. Kuchera's business, Frontline Ministries, which was not related to the campaign. The facts and the evidence will show, and the testimony that will be given by Ms. Wrights reveals that this was an impermissible use of campaign funds by the Kuchera campaign. As a brief housekeeping matter, the executive director is no longer asking the commission to find liability on count number 39, which related to $200 that Mr. Kuchera explained at our pre-hearing conference was used to purchase gas for his campaign buses. So this hearing today is only about counts 37 and 38 and really only come down to the fact that the campaign funds, as the evidence will show, was not used for campaign purposes. Our witnesses will help tell the story today to close this final door on complaint number 750 by explaining that the money was used for an expense unrelated to Mr. Kuchera's campaign.
Thank you. Mr. Kuchera, as the respondent, you may give an opening statement now, or as mentioned earlier, you can wait until after the complainant's presentation of evidence.
I'll wait.
Okay.
I believe we told our witness 145 to appear.
Yeah, just need 5 minutes.
Would it be all right to give her the 5 minutes to get on the call?
That's fine.
Okay.
Counsel, would you reiterate what the statute is that you're relying on, what the elements are that you need to satisfy?
Yes, it is KSA 25-4157 sub A. And because of the stipulated facts, Mr. Kuchera and complainant have already agreed that he made these two transactions, moved the campaign contributions from the campaign fund to create these two cashier's checks that went to Ms. Wrights. And so the only thing that we have to prove to show liability is that $10,835.62 that was spent by the campaign was not one of the enumerated purposes that you may use campaign funds for under KSA 25-4157A. A, excuse me, not
And that's
sub A.
not sub A, but that is in fact a different statute.
Yeah, it's 4157A, not sub A.
That total without the third in there again.
You want just the total?
Yeah.
The total amount of the two is $10,835.62.
Thank you.
Yes.
While we're waiting on the witness, one further clarification. Thank you for that question, Commissioner Berger. So the last sentence of the description of both counts 37 and 38 say pursuant to KSA 25-4171A.
But as a sub A,
There's a sub A, thank you, that's where I'm going. Intentional violation of any provision of KSA 25-4157A without parentheses is a class A misdemeanor. So just for the interest of a clear record, those are the two statutes that are at issue in this hearing, is that correct?
Yes,
the
KSA 20,
second one seems to be referring back to the first one, so I just wanted that to be clear.
only at issue today is KSA 25-4157A. As the commission, we're not making a criminal finding, so that is just a statement of the law. 25-4171A just states that those intentional violations of 25-4157A is a misdemeanor. We're not, to prove a violation of 25-4157A does not require intent in the same way that an intentional violation would be a misdemeanor. It just requires general, not specific intent.
Understood, thank you.
Yes. Do any other commissioners have questions before our witness joins? Happy to offer clarity with all these little letters hiding in the statutes as they do. Appreciate the patience there. Would it be all right, Commissioner Jackson, if we went ahead and swore Mr. Kuchera in just because he will be helping our notary identify our virtual witness for oath purposes?
Yeah, that's fine with me, so Paige, why don't we go ahead and swear in Mr. Kuchera?
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in this, excuse me, you do solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in the matter at issue shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Gives her 1 minute. She tested it, said it worked, so
And the witness is joining virtually?
yes, she will be joining via video conference.
Jared, just brief housekeeping as we're waiting for the witness. You are representing yourself, correct?
At the moment, yeah. Okay.
And you do not intend on calling any witnesses other than yourself, is that correct?
That's right. At the moment, yeah,
Thank you.
for this meeting.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, do you think we should ask Commissioner Jerry,
Over
thank you, Helmer, if he could try to mute
again.
again, or if we can mute him on our own, is that feasible?
Yes, Commissioner Helmer, can you hear us?
Yes. I could hear his voice, but I don't know what he said.
Okay, well, we're getting a bit of noise on your end of the phone. Do you have the ability to mute yourself when you're not speaking?
Yes.
If you could do so, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I just did. Did that help?
Still hear ya. Yeah.
I just call him cell phone and see if I can get her to.
Commissioner Jackson, may I have permission to call the witness on my phone to get her connected?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Kuchera, is that okay with you?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, she's on.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
You literally called her. Great. Thank you for joining us today.
May I?
Yeah.
And this is Miss Wrights, is that how we say your name?
Yes, rights.
Wrights. Good afternoon. Would the record please reflect that plaintiff's witness, Miss Patricia Wrights, has joined this hearing by telephone and video conference? Reitz is how you spell her last name. Counsel, you may proceed with the examination.
Appreciate it.
Actually, no, first we need to swear in this witness.
Yes, thank you.
So Paige, if we could do that.
Yep. Quick verification. Mr. Kuchera, do you mind, for the record, verifying that that is Patricia Wrights?
Hi, Pat. Yeah, that's Pat Wrights.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
If you could please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in the matter at issue shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please proceed, counsel.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Could you please introduce yourself to the commissioners?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Ms. Wright, sorry.
Yes.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes. My name's Patricia Wrights. I understand this is the ethics committee for the gubernatorial campaign, and I was the treasurer for that campaign for a few months.
And did you know Mr. Kuchera before his campaign?
Yes, I did.
How did you know him?
We first met at a church that he was pastoring called Frontline Church. That was the early 2000s. And after that, we didn't go to that church after a while, and then we just stayed friends. They boarded a horse at our place, so we knew them from that. And then after a few years, they didn't board the horse anymore, and we didn't hear from them for a while. And we heard from them again, and that's how we know each other.
So in our factual stipulations, which I've mentioned, you know, these exhibits to you before, but Mr. Kuchera and the executive director have agreed or stipulated that there were 2 cashier's checks that we've already sent you copies of in the amount of $9,510 and $1,325.62 that were transferred to you on or about March 13th, 2018. I've sent these to you ahead of time, and we have already provided them to the commission, but I would appreciate your patience as we will be entering exhibits today. So this documentation has already been provided to the commission, and Mr. Kuchera has seen it. It is what he provided at the pre-hearing conference. But I will pass these examples of 2 cashier's checks around. I would like them to be formally marked as Exhibit 1. And I request them to be admitted and published. There's a lot of comments, so.
Are these the 2 Bank of America checks called cashier's checks redacted?
Yes, exactly.
Counsel, the first one that you handed me is going to be Exhibit 1, is that correct?
Yes, please.
Any objection to its admission? Okay, hearing none. Exhibit 1 is hereby admitted into the record.
And Ms. Wrights, I've sent you copies of these as well. Do you have the cashier's check in front of you, these 2? Or do you have them nearby to look at?
I didn't. I I did not print out a copy.
Okay. Okay. But you've looked at those cashier's checks?
Yes, I did.
And do you remember who is listed on the pay to the order of line on those checks?
When I looked at them yesterday, I believe it was to me, Patricia writes.
Yes. And do you remember receiving those checks?
I don't remember receiving them specifically. I was receiving checks because of agreements that Patrick and I made for my salary as treasurer and also for paying the monthly payments on some loans that I took out on his behalf.
Okay, I want to dive into that a little bit more. So let's take that one at a time. You mentioned payments for salary as treasurer. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yes, we agreed that the salary I would receive for being treasurer on that gubernatorial campaign would be $6,000 a month.
Were the two transactions reflected in those cashier's checks, salary for your treasurer position?
That part I do not recall. If there was another check in that time frame for $6,000, then the answer would be no. However, if those were the only two in that time frame, then 6,000 of that would have been my salary.
Let me back up a little bit to avoid confusion. So when we'd spoken with you before, you'd mentioned that these two payments were related to personal loans that were not to do with your salary. Is that, do you ever, let me back up
Yep.
for a second.
We did talk about that. Your question was, do I remember specifically if that was all toward the loan payments or some of that was toward the salary? And that part I'm fuzzy on, but it could have all been toward the loan payments. But if there was a $6,000 check in that time frame, then it was all toward the loan payments.
Oh, I see what you're asking. What you're saying. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So to be clear, though, each of these checks, neither of these checks was for $6,000. Are you remembering
right.
what I'm? Okay. Okay. Making sure we're on the same page here. So you mentioned a group of personal loans that you'd taken out for Mr. Kuchera. Were the loans, who was the debtor on the loans?
It was me, Patricia writes.
Was Mr. Kuchera on these loans at all?
No, not at all.
Do you remember roughly when you loaned him these series of loans you're referring to?
Yes, I was starting to go through the process of getting the loans in the month of August of 2017. So I probably had the loans issued to me somewhere in September of 2017, maybe into October a little bit.
Okay. And what were the loans for?
Patrick's asked me to take out some loans. He didn't tell me specifically what they were going to be used for, but I had really good credit and it was something that I could do for him. We had a verbal agreement that he would make the loan payments and then within a year have them all paid back. And the only inconvenience to me was the work done to take the loans out. So if it was going to be paid back, it didn't matter to me because that would actually help my credit score. So I didn't know what he was going to use the money for, to get back to your question.
And did he fully pay you back for the loans?
Not fully, no.
Okay, so we've talked about the payments that you received. I'm now going to ask you about cashier's checks that you wrote to Mr. Kuchera when asked to take out loans for him and his businesses. Again, your patience is very much appreciated as I get these exhibits handed out. These, again, for those of you online, these will be titled, the document is Rights, R-E-I-T-Z, Checks to Frontline. And I asked the presiding member to please mark this as Exhibit 2. I will show it to Mr. Kuchera as well, and I believe I provided him with copies. I will pass these around.
Could you make a I'm sorry, could you make a proffer, please, as to how this is relevant to the remaining counts in this complaint?
Yes, absolutely. So the reason for the relevance here is that if the transactions, the approximate $10,000 was being used to pay back a loan, we're showing that it is a personal loan that went to a business and is not a legitimate campaign expense.
Any objections to the admission of Exhibit 2?
I'm not sure if I have standing for, do we have standing as commissioners? I don't see the relevance to this in light of prior decisions that have been made by the commission.
We don't follow typical evidentiary rules, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
As the presiding officer, I will allow this to be entered into the record in this hearing.
Thank you. Ms. Wrights, I've sent you these ahead of time and you, I believe, reviewed them. Do you remember making these cashier check transactions generally?
I do, yes. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember the checks.
Just a point of clarification, I'm not sure if I was clear, but I would move to admit and publish Exhibit 3, which is the image of the cashier's checks received from Frontline Bank of America account.
Council, what do you mean by and publish Exhibit 3?
I guess just me.
Admitted in evidence?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you said Exhibit 3 right now.
I apologize.
Exhibit 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I noticed, as we can all see on these cashier's checks, they were made out to Frontline Ministries. Why were these checks made out to Frontline Ministries? Excuse me.
It was per Patrick's direction. He asked me to make it out to Frontline Ministries. It came from the money that I took out as personal loans.
Okay. Okay. All right. I just have one final question for you, Ms. Wrights, which is, have you experienced financial consequences personally as a result of the outstanding loans not being repaid?
Yes, I have. My husband and I have filed bankruptcy because we could not repay those loans.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Ms. Wrights. I don't need any more from this witness. I'm not sure if we should.
Any cross-examination, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's proceed.
This is not my opening statement, or is this,
Right.
This is, okay.
Yeah, this is still part of a presentation of the complainant's evidence.
Okay, and is this,
You had said you would defer your opening statement until after the conclusion of complainant's presentation.
Yeah.
So this right now is your opportunity to ask questions of the witness that the complainant has called,
yes,
which we'll call its cross-examination.
right.
After the complainant rests its case, before it switches to you, you can give an opening statement at that point if you'd like.
Okay, right, so this is cross-examination
Correct.
first. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay. In light of this being cross-examination, may I address the commission before I ask Pat Wrights anything or not?
No, that would be your opening statement. So if you wish to address the commission, you'll have to do that after this witness has concluded her testimony. The only thing you can do right now is cross-examination.
Okay,
If you choose not to cross-examine this witness, that's your prerogative.
yeah, no,
And let me ask counsel for complainant, is there additional evidence or testimony that you'll be presenting?
Yes, we will have additional testimony and evidence. Yes.
So do you wish to proceed with cross-examination of this witness? This is your time to do so if you wish. to
with
ask
just
questions.
her.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Hi, Pat.
Okay.
So the first thing that I want to start off with is I understand that through our interaction, it has caused you and your husband, who are very dear friends of ours, we go way back. And I apologize and I'm sorry that that has caused you pain. I just want to start right there because that's kind of the way you ended. With that said, I also want to say I probably would have talked with you earlier or had a little bit more evidence to show here today, but I just found the cashier's check just 2 days ago. So thank God I found those, because up to that point, I didn't know where that money was going, that the commission was asking me where this money went. We scoured bank statements. And so anyway, I just kind of,
I apologize for interrupting.
I'm sorry.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
This needs to be cross-examination of this witness.
Okay,
So
okay, great.
You asking her questions.
Okay, great. So my first question, Pat, would be, have you and Al been in ministry before? Are you pastors? Have you been in ministry in your career?
Yes. Yes, we
Okay.
have.
Okay. And do you have your own nonprofit in the course of your career? Churches, ministries, nonprofits that are gospel related? Do you have experience, you and Al, for decades in this?
We haven't had experience with that in the past, yes.
Okay. So what I'm trying to establish is that other than a normal citizen who's never been in ministry, never been a missionary, never received donations to a nonprofit or a church, you and Al certainly understand how that works, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Secondly, when you give money to a nonprofit, which you did, you gave it to Frontline Ministries. You knew when you gave that money that you were giving it to Frontline Ministries, of which you and your family had been a part of for many years, right? Like you were familiar with Mari and I, familiar with Frontline Ministries, going all the way back to, as you said, the early 2000s. In other words, Frontline Ministries wasn't just resurrected or put into life just at this time. You had a history with Mari and I, our family, and Frontline Ministries, correct?
I did have a history with Frontline Ministries, yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you and Al on the 100,000, 100,000, and 30,000, did you take it as a tax deduction on your tax returns?
Objection, relevance.
Any response?
Yeah, it's simple. If you donate money to a church or a nonprofit, it's tax deductible. I'm simply asking, did you use it as a tax deduction that would be seen in your tax returns?
Can you explain the relevance of that to the question here about campaign finance laws?
Yes. Let me say that by donating the money to Frontline Ministries, you knew it was a donation, and I believe they took it as a tax deduction on their tax returns, therefore it's not a loan. I'm being accused, or there's a statement that it's a loan.
Counsel for complainant, responses to the relevance in response to what we just heard?
Well, first of all, I haven't gotten my answer.
You can't get your answer unless I allow the question.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's acceptable. I will
You
accept
withdraw your
this.
objection?
I withdraw my objection.
Okay. Would you re-ask your question so she can answer?
Yes, I would like to know if the 100,000, the 100,000 and the 30,000 was taken as a tax deduction on your tax returns.
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I would have to ask my tax advisor on how to answer that question. Whether we did or not, I don't remember.
Okay. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know how this works, but I think that's a very relevant question. I don't know.
Remember, Mr. Chair, this is not your opportunity to testify.
Okay,
You're asking questions of her. You were
okay,
able to ask her the question.
okay,
She answered to the best of her recollection.
okay,
So now you need to move on with your cross-examination.
okay. Pat, I happen to know that there was a decision made by you and Al talking with Gene Franklin about how you were to do this. And I know I was not present in the room at the time that decision was made. And I hope that you would admit here that you talked with Gene about this, which Gene isn't here to testify, but I do know I was not in the room, and I am refuting that I directed you to have it go to Frontline Ministries. I'm refuting that.
Remember, you need to ask a question.
Okay, I can only ask the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is problem.
Do you remember meeting with Gene and Al at your home? I was not present when it was discussed by you guys on the advantages and disadvantages of how you would do this, and you chose to do it with Frontline Ministries as a donation. Do you remember that?
I'm sorry, Patrick. I just don't remember that meeting.
Okay. Pat, you said you weren't sure what the money may be used for. I have countless pictures, video, recordings of you present at meetings, along with Al present at meetings regarding the aviation technology and the concept of creating light aircraft for affordable missionary training aircraft, light aircraft. You said you didn't know what the money would go for or what we were trying to do. This was not one meeting. This went over the period of many months, involving, oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize.
I'm sorry.
I
I'm
know
not
you're
real
not
good
an
at this.
attorney,
I'm sorry.
but please remember.
Okay.
This is your opportunity to ask her questions.
Okay,
It's not your opportunity.
does this jot your memory of meetings that you and Al were at over the course of many days, many weeks, and many months, all revolving around aviation? Do you remember
Yes,
being
I
in those
recall
meetings? Okay.
Yes.
And do you remember and do you support my claim that this wasn't one meeting on a hunch, but it was many meetings over many months? And again, I have pictures and video and recordings, and Al was present, and many people were present. And so do you remember that there was a duration of many meetings and over a period of time?
Objection asked and answered.
Agreed. Let's move on. I think she already answered in the affirmative.
Okay.
Objection sustained.
Okay. Pat, do you have any written agreement or any documentation from Frontline Ministries repaying any loan of the donation back to you? Do you have any written agreement between Frontline and yourself to be
I do
repaid?
not. No.
Pat, when I presented the cashier's check of $9,500 and $1,315.62. Those were made out to you, right? The ones that they're
Yes.
showing us right now, right? And you obviously saw that, but do you also see that the remitter is Patrick Kuchera Election Committee? Can you verify that that is who the payer of these cashier's checks is?
I believe that's what it says right on there.
Yeah. And at that time, were you the treasurer?
It depends on the date of those checks.
The date of the check is 3/13. Can you tell me, I can't remember the date. Can you tell me the date that you became treasurer of the campaign?
Yes, I
Just for a
became
clear
treasurer.
record. Hold on a moment, Ms. Rice, I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Chair, I think you just said 3/13.
No, I'm sorry, am I seeing that wrong?
Are you looking at Exhibit 1?
Mm.
Okay, I just want the record to be clear. So you're referring to Complainant's Exhibit 1.
Yeah. What I'm trying to establish is that the cashier's check went to you, Patricia's Rights, and you knew that the check was coming from the Patrick Kuchera Election Committee on March 13th, 2018. Do you know the date that you became treasurer?
Yes, I became treasurer in September of 2017.
September of 2017. So if you were treasurer starting in September of 2017, then you were treasurer on March 13th when I paid you the $9,500, which I now know a little bit more about. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta go. I'm sorry. I started to go into opening statement. Okay. So you were the treasurer when the $9,500 was given to you, yes?
Yes,
And you were treasurer of my campaign on March 13th when the 13/15/62 was given to you also from my election committee.
yes,
Okay. Pat, you have a history of working in government, is that right?
yes,
And if I recollect, I think it was over 30 years of impeccable record in the EPA. Is that right? I think it's over 30 years, right?
yeah, just at 30 years, yes.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I picked you because I knew how regulatory this could be. And this is a compliment. I knew you had an impeccable record. I knew that you knew how government worked. And I knew that you knew a little bit about financial oversight from your EPA position as we discussed. Therefore, Pat, as the treasurer, would you have ever cashed a check knowing that it would have come from a slush fund, as I'm being accused of, a slush fund, a private slush fund, if you knew it wasn't right, if you knew it was against election finance laws? Would you have cashed this check?
I'm not
As the
really
treasurer.
familiar with what you mean by slush fund. Can you repeat the question without using that, please?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna use it because, I think before you got on the call, it was stated for the record that they thought I took this from a slush fund, my own personal slush fund. And as the treasurer who received the check, and it says it came from my election account, my campaign account, would you have knowingly cashed these checks thinking that it came from my own personal slush fund?
Okay, once again, the term slush fund is not something I am familiar with. So are you saying that that would be money that's unethical?
You know what? I'm gonna be in agreement with you. I don't know what a slush fund is either, because I've never been accused of using a slush fund, and I don't know why I'm being accused of a slush fund now. When the check went to my treasurer for salary, which I will agree on that, you stated that you received salary. And so I'm gonna agree that now I know there was a check made to you for salary that we talked about, or that you had mentioned. But what I'm saying is,
Chair, remember questions.
oh, sorry. I'll pass on this one. I don't know how to state it any further. So let me go to the next point. Pat, do you remember in February of 2018, we all went, and by we, I'd have to remember how many people, but it was 6 or 7 or 8 people. We all went to Ohio. You remember going on that? I think it was a 3-day trip to Ohio.
I remember that trip, yes.
Okay. Do you remember putting the expenses to that trip on a personal credit card? Do you remember paying for those expenses?
Objection relevance.
Can you explain how this ties into the allegations?
Yes, because I believe, I can't completely prove it. I just found these 2 days ago, and I went back through and realized that in less than a month from these reimbursements to Patricia Wrights, we went to Columbus, Ohio for our campaign. It was a 3-day trip. And again, we're talking 6 to 7 years ago. So I'm just trying to remember. But my wife and I were talking, we thought that Pat paid for a lot of the expenses of that trip. We're trying to remember what might have been reimbursed. Because what I know, sir, I didn't use a slush fund to pay myself or pay personal loans, which is what I'm being accused of. So the truth is, I have to prove where the money went, which maybe I don't even, because the gentleman that spoke a little bit earlier, God bless him, I wrote it down here. He wondered what the relevance was of that as well. And so I kind of do too. Christopher Berger had mentioned, what's the relevance, but you said that you wanted to allow them understanding. I believe if given the time, I might be able to find out. It's a vague memory. Again, we're talking 6 to 7 years ago, but my wife and I were talking, and we thought that Pat had paid for a lot of the expenses of our travel, if I remember right, and wondered if some of this was reimbursement for that trip. Pat.
Hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's your position on why this Ohio trip and the expenses are relevant to these allegations. Counsel, can you elaborate on your argument as to why it's not relevant?
I guess I'm trying to understand. He's saying that I guess it's relevant to. That's fine.
Well, of course it's relevant.
I will withdraw my objection.
I'm sorry.
So you withdraw your objection?
I'm withdrawing my objection.
Okay. Can you, Ms. Wrights, do you recall the question about the Ohio trip and how the reimbursement for that was handled? Or would you like Mr. Chair to
Yes,
react?
Okay, so if I understand the question is, did I put any of the expenses from that trip on my own personal account and then ask for reimbursement from that
Yes,
trip?
that's what
The
I'm
answer is
asking.
yes. The answer is yes and yes. I kept track with receipts of everything that we expended on that trip, and I remember submitting it for reimbursement.
And we vaguely remember that. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. We're talking about 6 to 7 years ago. What I know, Pat, is that that's what Maury and I, as we went back and looked at our pictures, our video of that timeline, and we vaguely remember that. And I just remembered that. So thank you, because our memory and my wife's memory of what you just said is true, would more than likely be a very good reason why you were reimbursed. Pat, do you remember what kind of expenses that you put on your card? Can we talk about airfares? Can we talk about hotels, meals? What do you remember?
I don't remember the specific expenses. I just remember keeping track of the expenses and having receipts, but I don't remember what they were from.
Okay. Thank you very much. That, I think you just helped validate. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any redirect for this witness?
Very briefly, with your permission. Thank you. Ms. Wrights, I just have a very quick question for you. If there were records indicating, such as a check for $6,000 that you had been paid your monthly salary as treasurer in March of 2018, then the $10,835.62 would not have been your salary as treasurer. Is that right?
Not the entire amount, correct. I'm just saying it could have been partially, or we could have been late with some payments and we could have been catching up. Unless I see each month and see how it all added up, I don't know how to answer that question specifically.
Okay. I guess my question is, if there was a check for $6,000 that was issued to you on March 2nd, 2018, were you paid more than once a month for your salary?
No, I was not. It was $6,000 a month. I do recall that I wasn't always paid on time, so it could have been catching up. I don't remember though.
Exactly.
The other thing I just wanted to ask you about was, I don't think you have this in front of you. Commissioners will though. And you've probably seen this before. I'm referring to the amended July of 2018 receipts and expenditure report that was filed by the Kuchera campaign. I'm going to read a line off to you since you may not have it in front of you. This is
Complainant's Exhibit 3.
yes. Exhibit 3, and I have copies for everyone online. For those of you online, it is the amended July 2018 receipts and expenditures report. Three.
Council, I'll just note for the record that technically a redirect should be restricted to the scope of the cross-examination, but I understand we're not subject to the federal rules of evidence here, so I'll allow this in. But that means Mr. Kuchera, if he wants to ask questions about this or additional topics on his redraw, he can do so.
I understand.
You understand?
I will keep this to something that was brought up in cross.
Okay.
So this is specifically, Ms. Wrights, I'm looking, you don't have it in front of you, but for those of you with the exhibit, is the second to last page. And it is the third row from the bottom. Ms. Wrights, what I'm reading off is from Schedule C of the Receipts and Expenditures Report. Schedule C are expenditures that the campaign had made. I know you were treasurer, so you've probably seen these reports before. So on March 2nd, 2018, there is a Payment to Patricia Wrights as listed in the person who is paid. And the description of the payment says consultant campaign travel expense reimbursement, and the amount is for $1,500. Is that amount related to the Ohio trip Mr. Kuchera was asking you about?
It sounds like the right ballpark. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it certainly sounds like that, yes.
The only other question I have for you is on this exact same page. This again is something that you don't necessarily have in front of you, but it lists again on this report on March 2nd, 2018, Patricia Wrights is the person being paid. And in the description, it says consultant, fiduciary, and admin services, February through March, and lists the amount as being $6,000. When your salary was reported, what was it reported as on? Do you know what it showed up on as reports?
The verbiage that you just used right there is how I reported it.
That's how you reported your salaries. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions that I had for you on my redirect. I tried to keep it as much in the scope of process as I could, but I appreciate your time, Ms. Wrights.
Any further cross-examination, Mr. Chair?
Hmm. Um, $13.25. So Pat is not able to see this, right? Because it's not in front of her. But yeah, I'm seeing Pat on 3/13/18, the 1325.62 is listed as candidate miscellaneous expenses. So the 1315 is at least recorded as to where it went.
Is that a question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I'm asking Pat if, well, she can't see it, so I don't know if I can ask her a question. But my understanding for being called here today is to explain where these two checks went. My defense is I didn't use it for a slush fund. Unbelievable. And here it is, 1325.62, candidate miscellaneous expenses. Pat, this is November 5th, 2018. If she doesn't, I'm wondering if you created this report. I don't know if you did or if Greg did. Do you guys know when this report was?
If it
created?
was November, it was me. I created the one before Greg came on board.
In November of 2017?
Yes.
Yeah. So was this, but this is saying November 1st of 2018. A little bit later, I'll explain Greg Kuipers and that transition.
Yeah, that was not me if it's 2018.
Right. So Pat, on 3/13/18, I don't know if you can see it, but it says 1325.62, which is $10 more than the cashier's check here, which I'm called here today to explain where it went and to prove I didn't use it as a personal self slush fund. I'm guessing on 3/13/2018, that may have been recorded by you. I don't know. I don't know how to ask her that if she can't see it, but anyway, at least the commission knows where that money went and I didn't use it as a slush fund. So
Any further questions for the witness?
I think I'm I think I'm okay.
All right, thank you. Do any commissioners wish to ask questions of Ms. Wright?
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Temporary
please.
Chair,
Yes, please proceed, Commissioner Berger.
thank you. Can you say, Ms. Wright, whether these two checks we're talking about, this $9,510 and the $1,325.62 were or were not proper expenses for a campaign?
Wouldn't have written a check if I thought it was unethical or immoral or illegal. So to the best of my knowledge, they were proper expenses for the campaign, yes.
And for time purposes, this Exhibit 3 shows a report that was at least printed out on November 5th of 2018. Would you have been the one to fill that out?
It was the report over the dates in the early 2018, because that's when I was treasurer. Or is that report covering the dates later in the year of 2018?
They seem to run all the way through, July of 2018.
Okay. I would not have filled that report out then, no.
Would you have been the one to fill out the cashier's checks?
The ones prior to, there was a date in May when I switched from being treasurer to a candidate. I think that was May 13th or somewhere in that range. So any checks prior to
2018?
that date of 2018, yes. I would have been the one that's writing them or getting approval from Patrick to write them. After I became a candidate, though, I was no longer treasurer of that campaign.
So you would have written the cashier's checks dated March 13th of 2018?
I would have, I don't write the cashier's checks, but I may
Right.
have approved those, yes, yes,
Oh, you would have been the one responsible for ordering them.
yes.
So on this report that we see, those checks that we've talked about were written on March 13th of 2018 to you personally, but in the report itself, those checks, at least those amounts of checks of those same dates, are not shown as written to you, but as written to Patrick Kuchera. Can you explain why there's a discrepancy between how you wrote the check or ordered the check and how it was reported to the commission?
I cannot explain that discrepancy, no.
At that point in time, who was responsible for these reports?
Reports that, weren't they filed, was it semi-annually or quarterly?
Do you know the person who was filing them as of November of 2018?
That was the next treasurer, and Patrick would know his name.
Okay, thank you. No other question.
Thank you, Commissioner Berger.
Can you tell me more about this loan agreement? Was this all done verbally? Were there any emails back and forth figuring out the terms of this?
Yeah, the purpose of getting the loans was never real clear to me. It was just something Patrick had asked for, and I agreed to do that for him.
Did he ask for these specific amounts?
No, not specifically.
Was there a regular repayment schedule? Like, you said you didn't pay it back fully. Was there other payments that he made to you in repaying this loan, maybe out of different accounts?
Yes, he was making payments back to me, and I can't remember from what account, to pay the monthly amount that each loan required.
Okay, so he was just paying essentially what the exact payment was each month for those loans.
Yes,
And did you say multiple loans?
yes.
What was the total amount of loans that you procured for the benefit of Mr. Kucera and Frontline Ministries?
I don't remember the exact dollar. I just know it was that 230,000. It might have been a little more than that.
How many different loans comprise that 230,000?
I would have to ballpark it, but I'd say 10 to 12.
How much money did you receive from Mr. Kucera to satisfy your total debt obligation?
The monthly payments for those loans.
In
Through,
percentage terms, what does that equate to of the total outstanding sum?
I don't have those numbers available. I do not know. He
Can
paid
you
the monthly,
approximate?
he paid the monthly payments through July of 2018.
Maybe put differently, how much did you discharge in bankruptcy for these loans?
I don't recall those numbers.
So from what I'm hearing is he made the monthly payments for, oh. She just lost video. Can you still hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like he made the monthly payments on these loans for approximately a year and then stopped. Is that accurate?
Yeah, just a little less than a year, yes.
In your words, what is the accurate characterization of the relationship between the checks for $9,500 and $1,315.62 that we see on the cashier's checks made to you by Patrick Kucera Election Committee, as compared with the $9,510 and the $1,325.62 that we receive reported on the expenditures as payable to the candidate self miscellaneous expenses, Patrick Kucera, and what explains the $10 increment differences between the two?
Now you're asking me to dust off my memory without those numbers in front of me. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know the answer.
May I say something or no?
All right, now, any further questions from commissioners? Go ahead.
He mentioned the aircraft design projects. Was that something you had contributed to previously?
Could you repeat your question? Is that something, what?
So the aircraft design, was that something you had given money for prior?
Not prior, no.
Was that something you intended to give money for?
Yes.
Of the $230,000 that was given, how much of that did you intend to be given for the aircraft design?
It was not clear what all that money was going toward, because the way that it was presented to us as a business opportunity, there was like a big umbrella with several streams of revenue underneath it. And the aircraft design was one of those, and Frontline Ministries was one of those, as well as others. So it wasn't clear to me which one of those specifically it was going to go toward.
Did you have any knowledge that the funds would be used for campaigning?
No.
Did you, for all of those loans, you didn't think that any of that would go to the campaign?
No, I didn't think that at all.
Outside of these loans, did you contribute large sums of money to this Frontline Ministries?
I have contributed to Frontline Ministries in the past, but not contributions of that size. No.
What would you say you contributed prior?
Probably 10% of my salary, so a couple $100 a month.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness from the commission?
I have one. Is it fair to say, or can I just ask you, was it your expectation that in taking out $230,000 in loans and giving that amount to Frontline Ministries, it was your understanding that you would be paid back that sum, $230,000 in its entirety? Or was there any other agreed upon amount for which you had an expectation of receiving reimbursement that is somehow less than the $230,000 for which you've taken out loans?
We were of the impression that the monies that we were contributing, investing, I don't even know what it was at the time, were part of a big picture business plan. So I didn't know specifically what each dollar would go toward, but I believed it would go toward building a business that would bring some revenues back to us.
So you had no fixed sum in your mind that you expected as reimbursement for your loan?
No, I did not.
Are you suggesting that the investment that you made in potential airplane company was diverted into a political campaign against your wishes?
I'm not suggesting that, no.
Did you consent to those proceeds being used by the ministry for a political campaign?
No, I did not.
Did you expect those proceeds to be used to further a business venture?
Yes.
Do you believe the use of those proceeds for something other than the business venture was against your wishes?
Yes.
And was it with your consent?
No.
Were all of his other loan repayments done via cashier's check like this?
I believe so, yes.
When you received other reimbursement checks, who was the listed remitter, payer on those cashier's checks? Was it
I
Patrick
don't have that
Bucera? Was it
document.
Frontline Ministry?
I do not know. I don't remember.
But you believe you did receive those minimum payments in the form of cashier's checks?
I believe I did, yes.
Any further questions for Ms. Wrights? Okay, Ms. Wrights, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it. And I think you are now dismissed.
All right, thank you very much.
Am I able to ask cross?
No, your cross-examination concluded, and that's when we turn to the commission. You can say anything you want to about her testimony in your opening or closing statement.
Okay.
But
All
the
right.
time for examination between the actual parties has passed.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. We appreciate your time and your testimony.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Take care. Does the complainant have another witness to call?
I do. I would like to swear in the complainant himself for his testimony, with your permission.
Okay, please proceed.
You do solemnly swear, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the testimony you shall give in the matter at issue shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and this you do under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I do.
Please introduce yourself.
I am Mark Scoglin, the Executive Director of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission.
And how long have you been working on this particular investigation for complaint 750?
Quite some time. This has been a ongoing large-scale investigation that involved multiple agencies.
I'm going to refer you to the third amended complaint, that's already part of the record.
I have it here. I have it in front of me.
Perfect. There are only 2 counts remaining that are at issue today. Can you just briefly tell us what those 2 remaining counts relate to?
Yes, count 37 and 38 are counts alleging that in the expenditure of $9,510 from the campaign account on March 13th, 2018, and that the expenditure of $1,325.62 on March 13th, 2018 are both impermissible uses of the campaign fund under the Campaign Finance Act.
I'm now going to direct your attention to the report, which is Exhibit 3. And we're going to go to that same page we were working with earlier. So it's the second to last page of the report.
I am there.
I'm going to read 2 lines from the report. These are in the middle, and each of them occurred on March 13th, 2018. 3/13 of 18 is listed in the date column for both of these. The first one I will read. Patrick Kuchera, 5736 West 146th Street, Overland Park, Kansas. The reason listed for the expenditure is candidate, in parentheses, self, miscellaneous expenses, amount $9,510. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
The next one also on 03/13/18. Patrick Kuchera, 5736 West 146th Street, Overland Park, Kansas, 66206. The reason for the expenditure is candidate, in parentheses, self, miscellaneous expenses in the amount of $1,325.62. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Have you, Mr. Kuchera has provided us with some documentation. Have you been provided with any other documentation showing the purpose of these transactions?
No, other than the extensive bank records, obviously, that we have been utilizing in our investigation.
Okay, and I'll ask you more about those bank records here in a second. Do the amounts of the 2 cashier's checks that Mr. Kuchera submitted, the amounts on those 2 cashier checks, which I believe are their Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1. Do the amounts on those 2 cashier's checks match what is on that July 2018 report?
I believe that there's a $10 discrepancy.
Can you explain that discrepancy?
It's my understanding that that discrepancy comes from the cost in obtaining the cashier's check. It's an administrative fee. I believe that's correct.
We can hear more from Mr. Kuchera. I'm sure he can explain that as well. All right, so since we have that documentation supporting these 2 transactions, and Mr. Kuchera, and you have stipulated that the payment went to Ms. Wrights, not to himself, I want to ask you now about the flow of money and your reviewing of the bank records. So you mentioned this. What bank records have you revealed, just generally relating to the Kuchera campaign?
I have extensively reviewed, as far as I know, every line of the relevant period of the bank records for Frontline Ministries, 2 other associated businesses, 2 campaign accounts, and his personal bank account.
And how many campaign accounts did you say you had?
2.
And how many personal accounts did you review?
1.
And what is your general experience with reviewing financial and accounting records?
In my position, I frequently will assist in reviewing both obviously campaign finance reports, but obviously I also help in performing audits of campaign finance documents, which frequently requires extensive review of bank records and lining them up with the reports.
Okay. So I have here a document that appears to relate to the cash flow, since you have some experience with that. I would like this marked as Exhibit 4. I'm giving a copy to Mr. Kuchera as well. This is a demonstrative that has been prepared to show the flow of funds online. I put this in this morning and it has the word demonstrative in the PDF. I don't remember the exact verbiage. I was free.
Council, would you like this to be plaintiff's exhibit 4?
Complainant's exhibit 4, yes. Please.
Yeah, and the fact that it's being called a demonstrative is the nature it was compiled, in your opinion, should not affect the weight to be given it? Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. And Mr. Skoglund, do you have the exhibit 4?
Let me interject for a second. I think this is something which has already been determined by the commission to the extent that seeks to expand what the commission's prior decision was. It should not be used.
Council, can you help us understand where the figures in here come from?
The figures in here come from the bank account records that the executive director reviewed to determine that none of the funds ended up in the campaign account. That's the point of this demonstrative. It's not to expand on anything else.
But all the numbers in here, about a dollar figure.
Yes, they
They're
come
coming from where?
from the review of Frontline's bank account records and account statements.
But those underlying frontline account records and account statements are not in evidence, is that correct?
That's correct. They're part of the administrative record, but they are not entered into evidence in this hearing, no.
Okay.
I thought they would be too voluminous for it to have much, to serve much without having a demonstrative to explain where the funds went.
Okay, so we'll do this. You can ask the witness questions about this, but we are not going to admit this document as an exhibit into this administrative record
Okay,
because there's no underlying foundation otherwise in the record for the figures that we're seeing on this document.
I understand.
That's my concern. That I presume Commissioner Berger would address your concern.
I don't know where the questioning goes, but I know that we discussed counts other than 37, 38, and 39. And that is not those other counts are not the subject of this particular hearing. And to the extent that this exhibit or argument is used to try to expand this hearing, that's inappropriate.
Understood. Counsel, can you help explain briefly how the testimony that you intend to elicit from this demonstrative relates specifically to counts 37 and 38?
Yes. Ms. Wrights has testified that the $230,000, which were the earlier cashier's checks that we've entered as an exhibit, that was exhibit 2, that adds up to $230,000. That is what she has in our conversations indicated was being paid back. And that $230,000 that came in the form of 3 lump sums. This tracks where that money went from Frontline's account and shows that it did not go to the campaign account. That is the only purpose of this exhibit.
Okay.
Which is
Again,
the very reason why, pardon me, why I made the initial statement and concern about the introduction of that exhibit.
So the exhibit will not be entered into this record. You can ask the witness questions about this, but please keep your questions focused on how this information relates to counts 37 and 38, as you just explained, rather than going beyond that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Understood.
Please proceed.
So let's just have a conversation then. So can you tell us what happened after you reviewed the, let me back up for a second. Were you able to confirm in reviewing the bank records, the loans that Ms. Wrights referred to?
I confirmed that she deposited $230,000 in this time frame. Yes.
Can you tell us what happened with that $230,000?
I can. On the money was deposited, the $230,000 was deposited on 3 separate instances, 100,000, 100,000, and then 30,000. All at times in which the Frontline Ministries account was either negative or very low. The initial balance between September 13th, 2017 and November 21st, 2017, the initial balance was just below negative $4,000. And she deposited her first $200,000, $100,000 on one day, and then another $100,000 to follow. Of that money, none of that money ended up in the campaign account, not a dollar. There is the final balance of this particular time frame that ends in November 21st, 2017, ends with the final balance of $395.34 frontline account. Now, all of these payments went to other entities, did not go to campaign. Now we're only talking about the $230,000 that came in this time frame. So a little bit of other money came in, mostly from bounced checks and refunds. But again, all of that money also was not used for the campaign.
Thank you for that detailed description. Is there any other information related to the flow of money that the commissioners should know about?
That is really what the point of this is to show that because the initial amount was negative and the flow of money results in, at the end of this time frame, results in a very low balance of under $400 under a lowest intermediate balance analysis, or really any accounting analysis, there's no ability to show, or none of this money could possibly have ended up in the campaign.
Right. That's all my questions for my initial direct.
Thank you.
As the witness.
Mr. Jarrett's a cross-examination.
Did I just hear you say, Mr. Scholar, did I just want to make sure I just heard this right. Did you just say that, because I heard you say it several times, none of the money ended up in the campaign?
Yes.
And if the record would show, you actually said that more than once. So I'm so glad to hear that. Because a couple of the questions to Mrs. Wright's referred to what was stated as potentially a fact, that money from Frontline went to the campaign, in which it was not. You just admitted it. None of the money went from Frontline to my campaign. Again, I want to make sure that I'm hearing that right.
That's correct. None of the money that Mrs. Wright's put into the Frontline account ever ended up into the campaign account.
Okay, I want to make sure, because there was a few questions to Mrs. Wright's that made it sound like, and I didn't say objection because I don't think I can, but sitting here, it sounded to me like some at the table may have thought that her money that she gave to Frontline went from Frontline to the campaign. So you're conceding no money went from Frontline to the campaign?
None of this $230,000. That's correct. We're specifically talking about the two counts in front of us today.
Okay. Well, that's very good. And again, I don't know if this is my statement.
Not right,
But-
not yet. So right now it's your time to ask Mr. Scholar
Okay.
questions,
Okay, great.
if you'd like to.
Yes, and just for the record, the $10, is that discrepancy? Can everyone be in agreement that everybody knows that banks typically charge $10 or something like that for a cashier's check?
You can ask Mr.
Mark,
Scholar.
is that fair to concede, or are we here today because there's a $10 discrepancy? I
agree with you that that's not the issue here.
Okay, and would you agree so that we can put it to bed, because it's come up a couple of times? I think that extra $10 was what Bank of America or whoever makes for, right?
Yes, I believe that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Also, I wrote down here July 28th, and I'm trying to remember cashier's check, and I put July 28th. Do you remember a minute ago, you or Caitlin mentioned July 28th? I'm trying to remember what that was for. Okay. All right, here's a question. Can you help me understand? No, let me go back. Do you understand that nonprofits are called nonprofits because they're not supposed to make a profit? Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you understand that Patricia and Al Wrights, as she testified, have been in ministry for almost their entire career? It's in the 40-year range, Bible college, the whole deal.
Objection relevance.
Okay. Do you agree that she conceded that they have been in ministry, missionaries, and had a church? Did you hear
objection relevance.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can you help us can you help me understand how this relates to counts 37 and 38?
Oh, good point. Sorry, it got expanded there for a little bit and I probably don't need to expound
It's
upon
okay.
that.
Yeah, you can move.
But the point is, pastors, missionaries, church planters understand that once you give money to a nonprofit, there's no profit motive expected and no return expected. So, anyway, okay, are you aware that most nonprofits are in need of money? I mean, I could prove that out, but I mean, are you aware of that? Most nonprofits, like, hey, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
I can't speak generally about nonprofits.
Have you ever run a nonprofit?
No,
Have you ever been a pastor?
No.
Have you ever been a missionary?
No.
Have you run a ministry?
No.
Well, with the exception of the biggest names in the country, the big ones, and as a man who's worked with thousands and thousands of pastors on 5 continents, I can tell you that almost every pastor, every missionary, every minister I know, their account balance is near zero.
Chair, remember it's time to ask questions, not to testify.
Okay. So I guess I would just ask you, are you aware of that fact in that context?
I don't know, and I can't. I don't have any basis of knowledge for that.
Okay. No shame in a nonprofit and having money come in and then money going out to do the things that God wants them to do. Okay. Okay, I'm okay.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No.
Okay. Any questions by the commission of this witness? Yeah, and is Commissioner Helmer still on?
Oh. Okay. We have a quorum.
We do still have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, I noticed he dropped off within the last 3 or 4 minutes. Seems like the camera went just to Commissioner Berger.
I believe he has been off since about the time that Ms. Wright's left.
Oh, that long?
I believe so.
Yeah, we have a quorum. We have exactly 5. We'll tweak decisions, so.
Commissioner Jackson, recognizing that what was intended to be Exhibit 4 is not in fact admitted into evidence, is it okay for commissioners to ask questions to Director Skoglund about the document?
Yeah, I will allow that, but let's try to keep the questions geared towards issues germane to counts 37 and 38.
Sure. Director Skoglund, looking to the exhibit and understanding the testimony submitted by Mr. Kucera about the nature of the rights funds to Frontline Ministries, is it your position that the sum on the right side of the column are campaign expenditures?
It's my position that none of those are campaign expenditures.
Is it? So none of these were spent in furtherance of the campaign?
That is correct.
These were spent for Frontline Ministries purposes otherwise?
I can't specify that they were for Frontline Ministries, but I can specify that they were not, they were never deposited in the campaign or clearly utilized in any way to further the campaign.
Thank you.
Ask a question in relation to, or you, yes.
Go ahead.
The category on here that you have transfer to self/family, is that in reference to rights or to Kucera?
That is in reference to transfers to Mr. Kucera and his son Joey. His son Joey received $20,000 and he received $25,000. That $25,000 that he received from the personal into his personal account also depleted before any significant money was deposited into the campaign account. So again, that also could not have been campaign related.
You said you reviewed his personal bank statement as well. Did you see any history of transactions between him and Pat Wright?
Yes, there were transactions between himself and Ms. Wright's. They were both at different times for salary and for loan payments. I believe some may have been unspecified as well.
Out of his personal or out of the election?
There were some out of the election account and some out of the frontline account.
But not his personal.
I don't recall if he had expenditures out of his personal account for his rights or not, without reviewing the records.
Am I able to object or ask clarification?
You can object.
Okay,
You had your chance to cross-examine him. Remember that.
right, I
So
just,
this is the commissioner who's asking questions of this witness.
yeah, just clarification. You just said none of the money went from Frontline or whatever to the campaign. But she just asked you, are you suggesting that some of the campaign money, what money are you referring to that went from the campaign?
Should I respond?
No, please don't, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
I'm sorry.
This is not an opportunity to further your cross-examination.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You'll be able to address that if you wish to in your opening or closing statement.
Thank you for being so kind.
You bet.
Just try.
I know the procedures are a little tricky.
I didn't go to law school.
I did, and I still don't come.
Based on your review of all the cumulative statements, is it your opinion that there was in fact some type of loan agreement between Pat Ritz and Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Any further questions from commissions?
Yeah, I have one. Director Skoglund, is it your position that for these two relevant entries that we have on the campaign finance report, for which Patrick Usera, the candidate self miscellaneous expense, is identified twice, again on March 13th, 2018, for the sum of $9,510 and a sum of $1,325, is it your opinion that these were misreported on this report, given the cashier's checks that we can see are remitted by the Patrick Usera Election Committee to Patricia Wrights?
Yes, they should have been reported as payments to Ms. Wrights.
Do you have any explanation for why on this report, either Mr. Usera or Ms. Wrights may have elected to indicate Patrick Usera as being the entity to which these payments were remitted?
I could only speculate.
Any further questions from commissioners?
Okay, coming back to 37 and 38 then, Mr. Skoglund, the $9,510, do you have evidence to show that this was not used for proper campaign purposes?
Yes, it is my position that that this is payments for a loan, which is consistent with Ms. Wright's testimony, and that loan had no connection to the campaign and therefore was not a permissible campaign expenditure.
And that did those proceeds to pay the $9,510 come from campaign funds?
Yes.
And the source of those campaign funds was what? Does
The
it matter?
campaign account. It doesn't matter, but yes, it's the contributions to the campaign. It was the cashier's check was written on the campaign account.
So from a campaign account, check was written for payment of a loan.
Yes.
And the same for the 132562?
Yes.
Other than the testimony of Ms. Wrights, is there anything else that we should look at or use in our deliberations to evaluate this?
I think the testimony of Ms. Wrights, combined with other exhibits, I think is a strong example of showing that she was already paid for her salary during this time frame. Also, Mr. Kuchera has testified under oath that he did not remember what these were, what they would be for, and only now is conveniently coming up with 3 separate possible explanations for what they could be, and is not even landing on one. Between that and the fact that there were loans that existed, and we can provide evidence for other payments of these loans if needed. This is all evidence that shows that there were loans taken out by Ms. Wrights. That is uncontroverted. These loans were provided to Frontline. None of that Frontline money ended up in the campaign or had a campaign nexus of any kind, and therefore payments on that loan would not be a legitimate campaign expenditure.
For clarification's sake, is it the correct understanding that if any of those loan proceeds had been used for campaign expenses, these cashier checks would not be thrown?
I think that if a loan were taken to benefit a campaign, that would be permissible to pay the payments on that loan. The $230,000 is obviously a drastic overcontribution, as she was not the running mate at the time that these were taken out. But if you take a loan on a campaign, you can pay back the loan. But if it's not a campaign loan, you can't pay that back. That's just personal use.
Do we have anything to close? I mean, you're not asking for an inference of a respondent's lack of memory or failure to produce an argument as an admission of responsibility or guilt, are you?
No, my point is that we have evidence that we have provided indicating the existence of a loan, and that the only countervailing evidence is inconsistent with prior testimony and does not exist today.
And do we have anything to show within these records how much was otherwise being paid as on this loan?
I'd be happy to
I'll just tell you what I'm trying to figure out. 9510 and 1325 are pretty radically different amounts.
Yes.
And to be a loan payment, I would expect it to be similar to or consistent.
I would say that based on my review of the records, I would say it's not inconsistent to say that payments other than her salary as treasurer, other payments were not necessarily a consistent amount at any time to any person who was owed money.
Was there any collateral for those loans?
I'm unaware of.
Would it be possible to find out, to provide us with the minimum monthly payment owed on those loans?
I do not have those details. I do have a check that I can show you of at least one instance in which a payment on the loan was made, and the memo fields expresses this amount. If we'd like to show that, though, this is that was a check from October 2017 showing a payment to Patricia Wrights on the loan, and I'm happy to provide that in evidence.
Just from your memory, I'm guessing, was it close to either of these balances?
I believe it was just over $8,000.
And did you subpoena the bank or whoever, the institution that provided these loans, and we have records from that?
These were received from another agency who did subpoena these records as part of an investigation.
So you have all the bank records for these loans?
Yeah, we don't have anything on the loans. We were under the impression that these were payments to himself until the pre-hearing conference.
Director Stoveland, Ms. Wright's testimony, when asked of the $230,000 in loans for which she had an expectation of being paid back, she was not able to quantify, and she did not say that she expected full repayment of the $230,000 $230,000 in loan. She further used the word investment, and I believe she further evoked reference to some kind of a business plan involving Frontline Ministries. Given her testimony, and given your position that this was a loan for which she expected repayment back, do you have any conception of the amount to which she was owed or had an expectation of being owed?
I do not know. $230,000 was taken out here next day after this period we're talking about, after November 21st, 2017. I believe it was the next day she deposited $270,000, which I believe was an investment into the previously discussed U.S. aeronautics issue. My understanding, I'm only testifying to what I have heard. But my understanding is the investment was that $270,000, which we are not talking about today. The $230,000, my understanding is that that is this loan, or these loans that she took out for Frontline.
Which I just want to clarify to make sure I'm understanding things correctly. I know procedurally, I'm not even sure where we are right now, but I'm just based off of something that you said. I was under the impression that she took out the loans with the expectation that they'd be all the $230,000 be repaid in full, as she indicated at the beginning of her testimony. That she indicated that there would be no negative impacts to her because it would help her credit, etc. So is it your belief that this was intended to be paid back within the same 2 year, within a year or 2 years that she had indicated?
I can't speak to what her belief is or what she believed about this loan. All I can testify to is that it appears that there's no connection between this loan and the campaign, and therefore the campaign could not have made payments on this loan legally.
Just to be clear, there was no promissory note whatsoever, nothing in writing indicating the nature or terms of the loan.
I believe that is correct as far as I'm aware. I also, I don't want to go too far afield, based on my understanding of the much broader investigation, that is not atypical with other people who gave or loans or took credit out to benefit Mr. Kuchera.
Does the evidence indicate that Ms. Wrights was, by all appearances, a supporter of Frontline Ministries?
It appears that way.
Is it conceivable that she overextended herself financially in order to make a financial contribution to Frontline Ministries to bring it into solvency with some undefined expectation that it would benefit her in the long run?
That's entirely possible, but it still would not be a permissible campaign expenditure to pay that loan from the campaign.
Do you have any basis for determining these specific increments, or at least supporting them or underlying them to support the specific denominations?
I have nothing other than her testimony that that's what they were for.
And her testimony basically said that it could be payments for her work. And looking at the expenditure report, we see the $6,000 payment on February 8th. We see a $1,500 payment on March 2nd. And we have the $6,000 payment on another one on March 2nd. But then looking to other months, at least on this expenditure report, I'm not seeing any other payments to Ms. Wrights.
Yeah, on February 8th, 2018, she was paid $8,500 for January and February services as treasurer. On March 2nd, 2018, she was paid $6,000 for her services for February and March of treasurer. So it appears that she was paid properly for her amounts already during this time frame. She testified that if she were paid her salary during this time frame, then these payments could not have been for her salary as treasurer or for her work for the campaign.
But she
I thought you said it
continues,
Oh, please.
she continued to serve as treasurer for the months following March.
I don't recall when she became the running mate and at what point the treasurer responsibility changed to Mr. Kuiper's.
Okay.
Any further questions from the commission for Mr. Scogin?
Sorry, can you refresh my memory? You said you do have a check that shows that these loan payments were made.
Yes, I'm happy to provide that if you'd like.
Is there any way to get that into the evidentiary record today?
That's what I can do that right now. We have it here, but it has account numbers on it. So I'm trying to think of the best way to quickly redact it. But I have a copy of it here that I can provide from the bank record.
Sharpie it. Yeah.
It's a lot of sharpieing.
Here's what I'll suggest. I think questioning of Mr. Scogin has concluded. I think we're due for a brief recess. Are there additional witnesses that you'll be calling?
No more witnesses.
Okay, so let's take a recess. Mr. Scogin, if you could please get that document ready and complainant and proffer that into the record.
Absolutely.
And then I think we will move to Mr. Gutierrez's case. Mr. Gutierrez, will you have any witnesses to call?
Oh, just me.
Okay. Well, you can't Q&A yourself, obviously. So here's what we'll plan to do. You did not give your opening statement before.
You're
And
right.
it would be prejudicial for you to have to give your opening and closing together. So when we come back from the recess, we'll deal with this exhibit and the complainant. You can give your opening statement. Complainant can give their closing statement, and then you will give their closing statement. That allows you to take into account what you hear from the complainant for purposes of your closing statement. Does that make sense? So you'll have two opportunities.
Yeah, it's just real fresh right now.
I understand, but I think we're due for a quick recess, and I would like to get this exhibit into the record.
And Mr.
Related to some of the questions that we've been hearing.
Could maybe our office manager or somebody, maybe one of the commissioners actually possibly contact Mr. Helmer to see if he may be returning or if he has any issues in joining. I don't want to have an ex parte communication by trying to reach out to him in the middle of a hearing.
Agreed. I will talk.
Oh, you're out of water.
Interesting.
Okay, you can grab a small number. Thanks.
No, you're good.
Yeah, so
Water is life.
I think the live stream
Pull it back.
should be back on, just confirming it.
Pardon my,
Yep, you're back on.
okay, we got the web stream
Yes.
back on.
Yes.
Do we need Paige to be able to restart going on the record officially?
I think so.
No? Okay. All right, let's resume our hearing. Counsel to the complainant, I believe you were intending to introduce final exhibit.
Yes. Final exhibit, and for those of you online, it has been uploaded. It's an unnamed PDF, but the last three numbers are 117. Being as efficient as I could be. What this is another check as Director Scogin. I'm showing it to Mr. Kuchera as well. We've redacted checks that were not relevant and account numbers. I would request, what was that?
Commissioner Helmer.
Oh, okay. I would request this be marked and admitted as exhibit number 5 for complainant. There's 2 copies
And
there.
I believe it will actually be complainant exhibit 4 because the demonstrative.
Oh,
not
apologies.
exhibit.
Appreciate the clarification.
Where did you upload it?
It's to where I've been uploading all the exhibits within the open meeting complaint 750 complainants exhibits.
Okay, it's not there yet.
If you hit refresh, Commissioner Berger, it popped up for me.
Beautiful.
And that's loading.
And we can also email it to you directly if that's.
Yes,
No,
if you need it.
Commissioner Stride, I got it.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then this exhibit shows, as Executive Director Skoglund had mentioned, a payment.
I don't know if it's appropriate for you to explain what the exhibit is.
Okay.
I think it was in response to some commissioners' questions. So why don't we have any questions that you wish to ask about the exhibit? Just to explain it.
That makes
Council,
more
I don't
sense.
want you to be giving testimony here.
I don't either.
So are there any questions about this exhibit that anyone would like to ask Mr. Soglin to provide some context about it?
Okay, so I see a check for $8,200 payable from Frontline Ministries to Pat Wrights. And the memo field says loan payments October. This check is dated September 27th, 2017. Director Skoglund, what is the relationship between this $8,200 check to Pat Wrights from Frontline Ministries on September 27th and the expenditures report and the two payments at issue on March 13th, 2018?
Sure. Mr. Kuchera had loudly disputed the existence of loans from Ms. Wrights to Frontline Ministries. This shows that these loans obviously not only existed, but that Frontline Ministries was paying these loans back to her. So it contravenes the previous claim of those loans, that no loan existed between Ms. Wrights and Frontline.
So just to be clear, I see that this check is dated September 27th, 2017.
Yes, this was around the time that she had started to put the $230,000 into the account as well.
So in your opinion, this evidences prior payments made from Frontline Ministries in service of loan debt?
Yes. I would note that the amount, obviously, like you noted, shows that there were loans between herself and Frontline Ministries. The obviously the exact payment amount would differ a little bit since the additional amount she put in not all of that amount had occurred yet.
And it's your belief that these other two payments made March 13th, 2018 were intended to be subsequent payments ultimately made in service of loan debt?
Yes, pursuant to her testimony.
And what reason is there that we do not see more instances of loan repayments?
Simply, in this instance, we have a time where a memo field was actually filled out evidencing the loan payment. I don't recall exactly, without some deep dive here, whether other payments existed between himself and Ms. Wrights, but there were times in which he wrote salary on the check, and that was not what happened here. It clearly shows the existence of that loan arrangement between Ms. Wrights and Frontline Ministries.
And this check, September 27th, 2017, check number 1251. Is this the only check you could find that indicates loan payments payable to Pat Wrights from Frontline Ministries?
That's the one I'm providing. But in this time frame, I believe that maybe there were payments that were made to her loans in the amount of, I think, $14,000 during this time frame. That we can submit the actual bank records from Frontline to show those payments going out during that time frame. But the $8,200 that you have in front of you is part of that. That's a payment that was that shows that these are payments she is receiving on these loans that she made to Frontline.
Do you have an opinion based on your review of the financial record of the $230,000 in loan debt that Ms. Wrights incurred based on this check and based on other payments that you can see? Do you can you quantify how much of the loan debt that you believe that Pat Wrights had paid?
I can't, and since a large majority ended up in bankruptcy, this payment of $8,200 occurred before she provided the extra $30,000 in mid to late October as well. So this is a payment that was made on the loan before she even had deposited the full loan amount.
And you said that on this check, this is one of the instances where it is identified in the memo field as being loan payments. And you say that there were other checks in which it was indicated salary. Is it your belief that there were some checks payable to Pat Wrights that were misidentified and that were ultimately loan payments?
I believe that the two payments we're talking about today are consistent with her testimony that those were loan payments. She already had received her salary during the 3 months of 2018 that occurred before that. The campaign account properly discloses that she received those payments. She testified that if she had received her payment during this time frame, then all of this amount would be for loan rather than just a part of it for loan payment. Regardless, no portion of it is a proper loan repayment from the campaign.
Okay, any further questions from Mr. Scobell? If not, we will release him as a witness. Thank you for your testimony. And I understand there are no further witnesses, so Mr. Sheriff, we will now proceed to your opening statement. And remember that it'll be followed by the complainant's closing statement, which will be followed by your closing statement. So basically you have two chances here.
I have
Say
a
what you'd like to.
procedural question.
Sure.
Since the respondent is obviously not, when would be an appropriate time for us if we did have questions for the respondent? When would that fit in?
I think you could call him as an adverse direct witness, like.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of my question. I would like to reserve that. Reserve the right to do that after his opening.
I will ask Mr. Burris to look at the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act and give me an opinion on that as soon as possible. What's the exact question?
My question is, can I reserve the right to call him as an adverse witness until after he makes his opening statement? Since he's giving testimony in this.
I would say that as the presiding officer, I would not have a problem with that as long as it doesn't violate anything in the statute. Because technically he would have more typically provided his opening statement already before you have to make the decision on whether to call him as a witness. So barring anything to the contrary that we have to follow, you can reserve your right.
Okay.
So in the interest of time and efficiency, I would suggest that we proceed with Mr. Chair's opening statement.
And sorry, more procedure. Are we allowed to ask him questions after his opening, or how do we?
I don't think so unless he's a witness. But again, Mr. Burris can advise. The statute certainly does allow for commissioners to ask questions of the witnesses, in addition to asking questions of the parties after the completion. Yeah, after the completion of opening statements.
Okay, so after his opening statement, we can't because he's a party. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, please say what you would like to say in your opening statement.
Okay. This is rather unique to give an opening statement after we've been here all this time, but I'll do my best. I want to start by thanking the commission for dismissing dozens and dozens of accusations I'd like to start with the spirit of gratitude and thank you all for dismissing the accusations against my beloved bride, my wife of 34 years, that if you knew her, she's as innocent as a dove. I want to thank you for dismissing all of the allegations and charges against my son, who is a gem of a young man, happily married with a child. And after seeing more certified mail in my mailbox and people knocking at my door, respectfully, Mr. Scoveland, it's not funny. I see you smile there. It's been horrific. So I just want to, for whoever was a part of that, I want to just tell you, thank you so much. With the 3 that remain, I would open by sharing some of what I said that would have gotten some 40 other accusations or however many it was. Running for governor has been, or was at the time, a very challenging experience because I was in business as an entrepreneur. I was in ministry as a pastor and an evangelist, and then going into the political space. You don't see that very often. I think Mr. Scoveland might agree. You see a lot of people in politics. But those are 3 very different, very unique regulatory rules and regulations. And since this is the Ethics Commission, intent means a lot. Ethics, to me, means to do something unethical means you know something is wrong, but you do it anyway. That would be unethical. To do something accounting-wise that maybe is wrong, I think it's called misreported. I think you can misreport and not do anything unethical because you're not ethically doing something wrong. So I'd like to open by first saying thank you, and secondly, stating that if I had the time to show the track record of money that went to attorneys, I think there was at one time 6, 7, even 8 different types of attorneys in my house, in my living room, on our team. Mr. Scoveland knows where all the money went. A lot of consultants, and not just local consultants, but national people that have worked with presidents, senators, governors. So I want to establish the fact of not just saying thank you, but to establish the fact that I did everything in my power to do everything right, and the financial record would prove that. I didn't just wing it and try to save the money. We spent the money trying to get the best counsel and paid for countless hours of people in the same room saying, if we do this, then can we do that? And I did everything under the advice of counsel. And that's very important that y'all understand that. I did my best to do exactly what counsel, agents, consultants advised me to do. Furthermore, when Pat Wrights became my treasurer, I took great comfort in knowing that she had been in government for 30 years, had understood how the government worked, and she was quite familiar with financial integrity in governmental reporting. So it seems to me today, this has gotten broadened far beyond the 9,500 and the 1,300. I do thank the commission for trying to limit its scope. But Patricia Wrights is the one that received the money. She approved it. She knew about it. And I don't believe, if you understand who she is and her integrity, I don't believe that she would have taken money from a slush fund, Mr. Scoveland, a slush fund. She wouldn't have taken money for payments made out to her from the political campaign that she was a treasurer over if it was for loan payments to potentially Frontline Ministries, a nonprofit. When she testifies, there is no arrangement between her and Frontline Ministries in the first place. Now, Mr. Scoveland just said that I said under oath that I didn't know what these checks were. and what they were for. At the time that was true, commissioners, that was true. I said, I don't know at the moment. I walked into a meeting similar to this and I didn't know. As a matter of fact, I didn't know until just about a week ago. We couldn't find them in the bank records. And I ended up finding that they weren't in the bank records because they were a cashier's check. When I found the cashier's check, I then knew it went to Patricia Wrights. That then helped me understand, well, I didn't take the money, which I think that's what the accusation was. So let the commission know, we know the money didn't go to me. It went to Patricia Wrights. Now, after hearing her testimony today, which I never called her because I didn't think I could. I didn't know if that would be some violation of some rule, like tampering with the witness or whatever you see in the movies. I even told Caitlin, I don't know if I can talk to her or not. So we'll see what she says. I now can't verify for sure, but my best recollection is the 9,500 is for the salary. I think it is speculation. It's a huge leap to say that that is a payment to Frontline, and I'll come to that in just a minute. The testimony of Miss Wrights was, in fact, that it was irregular, inconsistent, and that I was behind. I believe the 9,500 was catching up on salary. It's an even number. I also don't have the time. If the commission would give me more time, I may be able to go back. She remembers putting some expenses on her credit card. She admitted to that. I'd like to find out those specific details. My campaign went to Columbus, Ohio. There were 5 or 6 of us. There were airline tickets. There were hotels. There were costs. There were fees. It was all campaign related. And that was just 3 weeks before this. My wife and I were discussing and talking. It could be that it was that. But I believe Mr. Skoglund is jumping and stretching that the 9,500 is in fact a payment or payments to Frontline, which I will talk about here in just a minute. As far as the 1315, I do agree with, forgive me, I'm trying to remember his name on the screen, Mr. Christopher Bergman, I believe is his name, sir. That the 1350.62 seems to be an odd number, and I think it had to do with travel expenses or something to that effect. But I believe it is speculative to say that I would take campaign money and pay Patricia Wrights, my treasurer, for Frontline loans, which she testified there is no loan payment, there is no loan agreement. And in regards to the check before us for $8,200, just because Frontline Ministries paid Pat Wrights money and says loan payments, that does not mean that there was a loan agreement. And she agreed there was no loan agreement. Further, as I have already stated, they've been in ministry for decades, like me. They also have been in the financial arenas. Her husband has been in investments and in finance his entire career. They knew when that money went to a nonprofit, it means nonprofit. That's what nonprofit means. It means you donate it. Furthermore, I would like the time to find out if they took it as a tax deduction, because if they took it as a tax deduction, that's what most people do. Furthermore, if I have more time, I know the person who talked with them about making a donation to the cause. And why? Because her husband has been in nations all over the world preaching the gospel, and the thought of a more affordable missionary aviation alternative would be rather appealing from a kingdom-minded and eternal perspective. I am under oath here today before you all. And I want to emphasize that I believe that the 9,500 was more closely related to paying her for her services as a treasurer, which I believe I was behind on, and or expenses to be reimbursed. Either way, Pat Wrights, my treasurer, told us, or did herself, this financial transaction. The reason there was no quantification of the 230,000 is because when you make a donation to a nonprofit ministry, there is no financial or business expectation in return for something you do with the nonprofit, and they knew it. Some of the questions of the commissioner today, and something repeated by Mr. Skoglund here today many, many times, about a loan payment to Frontline, I refute. There is no loan payment. If you will notice, the $9,500 is made to Patricia Wrights. What she does with that money is up to her. There's no loan agreement with Patricia Wrights. When I asked her about it, she agreed. Mr. Skoglund testified that her testimony said otherwise, yet if you go back and listen when I asked her, she agreed. There's no loan agreement. A ministry can support people in need. A ministry can support people who need help. Ministries have helped people with their home mortgages, their car loans, a gazillion other ways that pastors, churches, and ministers help people. I've done it many, many, many times. How do I do it? I don't make the payment for them. You give the money to the person, and they then take care of their financial need. In fairness to Miss Wrights, she's like me. We're talking about things that happened 7 to 8 years ago. And Mr. Skoglund, she said the word fuzzy a couple of different times. Things can get pretty fuzzy from a few years ago. You obviously have spent more time on this than us, so things might not be as funny or fuzzy, fuzzy to you, but to us, it's a little fuzzy. I believe that what I did with the $9,500 and the $1,300 was in keeping with my character and my integrity to do things the right way. I believe the 9,500 and the 13,1562 was in keeping with Pat Wright's character. She would have never taken money from the campaign to pay for loans. That's not her character. I believe these expenses were reimbursements of some sort, and or as your treasurer of my campaign.
Chair, thank you. I don't want to interrupt, but remember, you also have a closing statement after the complainant's closing statement.
Thank you.
So when you feel like you're at a stopping point, we can move to them and then we'll come
Let
back.
me look at my notes here for just a second. Also, something that might help everyone here, because it sounded like it was a little fuzzy. but it shouldn't be. Pat Wrights was my treasurer until sometime in May. And it was right at the deadline, May 30th or 31st, that she became my lieutenant governor. We could only make that change when Greg Kuipers agreed to be the treasurer so she could be that. And that was approximately May 31st or June 1st. That's important for you guys to know from the reporting perspective. And in my closing statement, I'm going to give a piece of evidence and a piece of information that I have yet to give through all of these proceedings that I will pick up on where that leaves off, but it'll be part of my closing statement. Let me look here real quick.
Regarding evidence, is there documentary evidence that you're going to be introducing?
Maybe, no, good point. It's verbal commentary, yes. But there is evidence of it, but it's not like a document or something like that. I think my final opening might be that when I'm not in the room and you are all contemplating my innocence, I just want to remind you, most people are not an entrepreneur in business and a pastor, an evangelist and missionary globally in ministry, and then try to run for governor. Therefore, in my time with Mr. Scoglin, there can be the assumptions of perceptions of, wow, what is this? But the reality of it is, I tried to do everything the right way. I tried to have a lot of I believe many of you are counsel and attorneys, and I tried to do all of that the right way. The word of God says that there's safety in the counsel and the multitude of many. And when you go to war, that if you have many advisors, it assures victory. I tried to do that. I tried really hard. I only did the 9,500 and the 1350, 1562, because Pat Wrights asked me to. That's the reality. She asked me to do this and I did it. I trusted her. Still do. She's an incredible woman. She's amazing. That doesn't mean that there's not some fuzziness in her testimony. I hope my opening statement might provide some clarity.
Thank you very much. Counsel for complainant, this does confirm that if you wish to examine the respondent, you may, or you can proceed to your closing statement.
I would like to proceed with my closing, but I would like just like maybe a minute to chat with complainant if that's all right.
Sure, fill out the record.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Please proceed.
This is not about what we think is ethical in the abstract. This is about what the Campaign Finance Act says is legally permissible.
Ooh.
And this is not about what we believe should be ethical or not. It is about what the law requires. A campaign account is not a personal account. It is not a slush fund, a piggy bank, or a way for candidates to freely spend their funds as they do, as they so choose. Nothing, the evidence does not show that the loans that Miss Wrights took out for Frontline Ministries went to the campaign. That's the end of the story. In the final hour, what does Mr. Kuchera tells us? He tells us it was either not a loan, or it was payment for an Ohio trip, or maybe it was her salary, or that somehow this was all done under the advice of counsel. I'll address each of these in kind, but these questions are creating confusion where there isn't confusion. There is not. It's clear. These checks, cashier's checks were made, and they were not related to the campaign, which means they are not a permissible expenditure under KSA 25-4157A. That's the end of story. That's all that's required for the complainant to show to demonstrate liability, not guilt, liability. On the first response, which Mr. Kuchera claims it's not a loan, we've provided the commission with proof of loan payments as opposed and Ms. Wright's testimony that there were various loans. And to address, there's a lot of loans is flying around a lot. To be clear, Ms. Wright has testified and told us that she took out several loans, plural, that then she gave the lump sums to Frontline Ministries. When we're referring to a loan being paid back by the campaign, I'm referring to the campaign paying back the loan that Ms. Wright's made to Frontline Ministries. We have proof of those loan payments indicating that that is not a supportive justification. And even if says it's not a loan, then additionally he says that they were expenses for an Ohio trip. As the July of 2018 expenditures report shows, that Ohio trip was already reimbursed. There's another claim that it's salary. However, again, the receipts and expenditures report shows, and Ms. Wright's indicated that her salary was typically $6,000, and that the verbiage used in that report of consultant, fiduciary, and admin services, February through March, indicate that she was paid. Finally, he claims that he relied on advice of counsel. I'll get into this more in a second, but there is no advice of counsel defense to Campaign Finance Act violations. There should not be in Kansas. We don't think that the commission should allow that, and there is not so far. So the first on the justification that it was her salary is we've already, we've already shown through the evidence that the reports indicate she had already been paid for that month. And we're not here about the fact that she gave money to a nonprofit or not. We're here because campaign funds went to Ms. Wright's for a reason that cannot be justified under the act. It is not a question of what she trusted and investments and things like that. This is, yes, background context, but the issue today is just, was that payment of approximately $10,000 a permissible campaign expenditure or not? And it was not. And Mr. Kuchera may tell us that he tried to do it the right way, and he may have tried, but you experienced a windfall. And when an individual experiences a windfall by using campaign contributions to pay off a personal or business related debt, they should be found liable and not be able to experience that windfall of approximately $10,000. Ms. Wright's told us that the issue of inconsistent payments has come up, but Ms. Wright's told us that he was essentially just paying the monthly minimum payments on various loans. So it should not be surprising that the amounts are different from one another or do not exactly add up. That's based on what Ms. Wright's told us. The legal question here is clear. The statute has a blanket prohibition on the use of campaign funds for the personal use by the candidate. And unless Mr. Kuchera can show that these two payments of approximately $10,000, I'm not giving the exact number at this point, but unless he can show that those payments were for one of the enumerated reasons under KSA 25-4157A, he is liable for impermissibly using funds. This was not Ms. Wright's salary. Again, that is what he's going to tell you, but the records don't support that. The records support that she had already been paid. And additionally, on the advice of counsel defense, as I've already alluded to, that should not be allowed. Kansas courts only recognize the defense of advice of counsel as a complete defense to malicious prosecution actions. They do not recognize it in other instances, and Mr. Kuchera does not offer any legal justification. I understand he's not an attorney, but there still needs to be legal justification as to why a new affirmative defense that has never applied in these type of cases should apply now. And on top of that, it is difficult for the commission to even apply this defense when Mr. Kuchera doesn't have counsel here with him today. He doesn't name counsel. He doesn't other than just mentioning he had conversations, he doesn't provide evidence of specific conversations of receiving advice of counsel to do things, or that counsel told him to write those checks. That specificity is lacking. Therefore, the commission should not allow him to use this defense. Mr. Kuchera stipulated the checks went to Ms. Wrights, and Ms. Wrights told us the checks were intended to be payments through her testimony to her for personal loans that she took out and then loaned to Mr. Kuchera's business, Frontline Ministries, not his campaign. Ms. Wrights confirmed that she was paid that month regardless, and Mr. Kuchera does not have any documentary proof to combat that which has been provided by the complainant today. And Mr. Kuchera cannot, because as what Ms. Wrights has told us under oath is that the payment she received was related to loans that she took out for Mr. Kuchera personally before she was even associated with the campaign. As you know, Mr. Kuchera said, and Ms. Wrights as well, she didn't even become the treasurer until later in the fall of 2017. Essentially, at the end of the day, the testimony makes it clear that Mr. Kuchera should be found liable, because regardless of what we think is or is not ethical in a personal sense, that's not what decides whether or not someone is liable under the Campaign Finance Act for impermissibly using campaign contributions. And so we ask the commission to find Mr. Kuchera liable for violating KSA 25-4157A for counts 37 and 38 in complaint number 750.
Thank you, counsel. Okay, Mr. Chair, at this point, we will conclude with your closing statement.
My closing statement. You know, if you keep saying something enough times, people will begin to believe it. So they keep saying that the loan payments that Ms. Wrights might have been referring to are in fact these checks. I dispute that. I believe they are separate monies for separate things, but there is no proof by counsel or Ms. Wrights that the 95 and the 1365.21 are in fact going to Ms. Wrights for some loan payments on a loan agreement that Ms. Wrights testified. See, they're saying that what she said under oath, but she was also under oath in this commission. And to me, in front of you, she said, there's no loan agreement. So just because there's a loan payment on something else doesn't mean that that 9,500 and that 1361 was for a loan payment. I believe they were salary. I believe there's reimbursement, and I believe there's cause to be able to prove that. Now, I wish I would have discovered this more than a week ago. And if the commission gives me more time, I may be able to do more research, but I don't do this full time as a living. I don't have all of the resources that the state has. Don't know how to get it all, but I can tell you that her salary was paid irregularly and inconsistently, and that I was behind. When you hear that this payment was for this month and it had already been paid, that's not true if you're 2 or 3 or 4 months behind. Why would it be 9,500? Isn't it possible that that's a month and a half of salary? I'm an entrepreneur. I pay people on payroll. I know what that's like. I know sometimes you don't have everything to pay everybody, partners, vendors. You work with people. You work out, hey, here's part of the bill. It is speculative in nature to say that 9,500 was used for this. And furthermore, Pat Wrights, my treasurer, knew about it, would never, I know her character, she would have never taken campaign funds, of which she's a treasurer for, to pay personal loans that had nothing to do with the campaign. That seems logical to me. Caitlin just said, I'm sorry, Miss
Stewart.
Counsel. Miss, I called her Caitlin through this whole process.
You're
I'm
fine.
sorry.
Go ahead.
keeps reiterating a loan to Frontline Ministries. Mr. Skoglund has said loan to Frontline Ministries so many times. That is wrong. As a matter of fact, I think that's unethical. When Ms. Wrights in this commission said there is no loan to Frontline Ministries, I asked her specifically, is there a loan agreement? These are business people, not just pastors. If there was a loan agreement, there would have been a loan agreement. If it was an investment, there would have been an investment agreement. They knew when they gave the money that they were doing it by faith. For those of you who know the good book, it says that we're to walk by faith and not by sight. I have pictures, video, other testimony. I didn't know what the procedures of her talking like this. I just don't have it at the moment. If the commission were to give me more time, I think I could produce more that would support that. I don't think it's necessary. Most people understand that a nonprofit means you donate it. You get nothing in return. And if they took a tax deduction for it, that is one of the reasons why people give, is for a tax deduction. That's a benefit. I wonder if that's been asked for. I wonder if that's been subpoenaed. There is no loan to Frontline Ministries. With all due respect, I'm trying to respect the rule of law. There's no loan. You're talking to a man who's been in ministry for decades. And when people give money to the church, there's no expectation. When they give money to the ministry, there's no expectation. And the only expectation is the return in the eternal. And Pat and Al Wright should know that more than anyone. I believe Pat Wrights was due back pay and or future pay as a treasurer. Oh, by the way, let me go on record with that. As an entrepreneur, when we have excess funds, do you know we pay people ahead? Because we know how money is fleeting, as the good book says. Do you know we actually pay people ahead? So if y'all want to say that we were current and then we paid her salary, how do you know that that wasn't for future salary? Would y'all, if anybody owns a business here, I hope someone would understand that this is not uncommon, at least in entrepreneurial spaces. We make money and we get ahead. You pay ahead. You pay your car payment ahead. You pay your home mortgage ahead. You get ahead. How can the commission allow the testimony that $9,500 wasn't salary? And again, gentleman on the screen made a good point. 9,500, it's kind of an even number. My ethical reputation is on the line here. Decades of service to people across the globe. Even now, I've got texts coming in from around the world, just trying to represent him well. And I'm on trial for trying to create a slush fund to take money from my campaign when I know from all the attorneys and advisors around me that there's people like you that exist. And by the way, I thank God for people like you. I ran for governor because I believe in the rule of law. The word of God says to pray for those that are in government. I've actually prayed for you guys. I actually believe that. I believe there's something called innocence until proven guilty. I believe there's something called speculation. I think it's just this huge jump to look at those payments that Pat Wrights told me to do, that we needed to do, and it went to her, and her integrity would never take campaign funds to use for something else. And if you knew her, you wouldn't accuse her of that. And if you knew me, you wouldn't accuse me of that either. This is my closing statement, right?
Yes, sir.
And so when I'm done talking, this is all over. Is that right?
When you're done talking, the commissioners will deliberate.
Okay, thank you. I want to review my notes. I have one more very significant point. I realize I'm not an attorney, and I apologize for my lack of understanding when to talk and when to not to talk. I hope that doesn't come across in any way as disrespect. But I want to make, I've saved one final point that I hope is an ace. And then I want to share a story as I close. Through all of this, the word loan has been mentioned quite a few times. Can we all agree to that? It's been mentioned over and over and over, the word loan. I bet you we've heard the word loan in excess of 20 times, maybe 30 times today. But we haven't talked about another kind of loan. And Caitlin, I may be giving you ammunition just to put on a fifth point of what I'm saying this money could be used for. So I will concede, I may be giving you something there. But one of the points of loan that we have not talked about have been brought up, and I didn't use it at any point of my defense over the last few months. But did you know candidates can loan money to their campaign? I hope I don't need to concede that. You can loan money to your campaign. Democrats do it, Republicans do it. Believe it or not, I've actually done the research and I have the names of the candidates on both sides of the aisle that you guys would know. Both the people I ran for governor against, but also presidents like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Do you know they loan money to their own campaign? I see some nods of heads. Do you know what my counsel told me? My campaign advisors told me? Do you know what my attorneys told me? My attorneys told me that every contribution I made was a loan to my campaign. I'm loaning it to my campaign, and therefore I could take money back and use it the way I want as a reimbursement for what I am loaning to my campaign. So one thing I would ask you all to consider is, you know, I funded my own campaign with my own money. And the accounting was supposed to show the records of what I was putting in was a loan. I don't think I have adequately shown that or proven that for a reason, and this is what I am going to close with. I had actually hoped that I never had to talk like this. And I was hoping that everything would get dismissed so I wouldn't have to reference this, but I'm going to. In January of 2017, and I hope I'm not making this too long, and I really hope everyone could just take a deep breath and hear what I'm about to share as I close. I called the Secretary of State's office with a room full of people begging me to bring a revival of revenue to the state of Kansas, because at the time we were about 500 million upside down. The Brownback tax cuts, regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, the collapse of the markets led to a deficit. And I called on speakerphone the Secretary of State's office because people were trying to get me to run for governor. And I called down here and I said, how do you form an exploratory campaign? Because I didn't want to sign up to run for governor. And a wonderful woman at the office, I said, I would like to get the information, but I want to do it privately. I Don't want anybody to know I'm even considering running for governor. This is January of 2017. She said, well, you can't get that information unless you do this, this, and this. And I said, well, is that private? And she said, yes, it's private. She said, nobody will ever know. I said, oh, okay. So if I really want to run for governor and really want to know what it takes, then I've got to do this. There's no other way to get the information to know what it takes. And if I do this, I don't want it in the press and the media that I'm running. And she said, yes. Well, some months later, 6 or 7 months later, there was an article in the newspaper when somebody else ran for governor that Patrick Kuchera was running for governor, and I was livid. I called the Secretary of State's office and I tried talking to the woman, and the woman says to me, I said it was supposed to be private. You said nothing would happen. She said, well, usually it doesn't become public until you announce. I say all of that to say through 2017, I was trying to discern what it would take and to see if I could do it. Pat Wrights was a part of that process. She actually encouraged me. She actually then said, I'll be the treasurer. That gave me confidence to move forward a little bit more. As I've already stated, on June 1st, we had to be on the ballot. And I didn't have a lieutenant governor, so Pat Wrights decided to be the lieutenant governor. Greg Kuipers took over as treasurer. This is important for you all to know, because during that transition in the reporting, maybe a few things happened. On June 12th, just 12 days later, I decided to announce that I was going to start campaigning. Up to that point, I had not really been campaigning. And on June 12th, I want the commission to know that as I was in Hays, Kansas on my 5th stop in my 5th city at 5 o'clock that day, my son, who is a weightlifter and a running back in college, dropped 300 pounds on his face and skull as I was stepping off my bus in front of the crowd at Hays, Kansas. 300 pounds. The bar came down across my son's face and nose, shattering his skull in 29 places. He broke his eyes, his nose, his nasal cavity, his jaw, teeth, throat. His head exploded. And so did my world. You all probably can tell by my personality, I'm kind of an upbeat guy. I'm a happy guy. I'm always happy. I'm usually very upbeat. But this knocked me to the ground. Countless surgeries. My son drank it through a straw for 8 months. PTS, therapy, 24-hour care. I want the commission to know. You didn't see me campaigning. There were no yard signs. I did go to the debates because my team told me you're already on the ticket. You can't get off the ticket. It was past June 1st. I did show up to some debates, but I didn't campaign. I didn't put out yard signs. For all practical purposes, my campaign was over. Politically, my name was on the ballot and I didn't check out, but mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, my wife and I checked out. It was a nightmare. I couldn't keep up with everything that a year and a half worth of preparation leading up to that. I was in the hospital for days. We brought my son home. Didn't leave his side. By the grace of God, he lived. Then we just hoped he would make it mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. But I just want the commission to know. There's a reason why everything kind of stopped in June and July. what is the relevance to these checks back in March that we're talking about here today? It's really only because the reports that seemed to maybe transition in that June to July and went on into November. It was hard. Almost impossible to survive. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to wake up. And I think had that not happened, I think there may have been closing statement is thank you for listening. Sorry that all of this has taken everyone's time. But after God knows how long and how many hours you put into this, Mark, it's come down to 2 checks. Those checks were not a slush fund. They were not me pulling money from here, from the left hand to pay the right hand. It's inconsistent with who I am and what I would do. It's inconsistent with Pat Wright's, and she testified here today. She said, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have done that. She said that under oath. I asked the commission to help me get my life back and my reputation back. So I can help God's people and the people of Kansas and recover. And with your grace and mercy and kindness to all the other accounts, if it would happen again here today, I can do more good for God's people and the people of Kansas than if you don't.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right. First, correct me if I'm mistaken, but we have the option to deliberate in a closed door recess session for the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. I would suggest that we do that. There is such a motion to move into recess session.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Second.
Second.
Okay. Do I read the motion? Inhale the motion.
The recess motion should work.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Can I get this?
I think so. I don't think it matters.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Sure. Chairman Hill, you want to
Sure.
read that motion to take us into recess?
For recess session, I move that the commission recess this open meeting with conflict counsel Jesse Burris present to discuss matters related to the confidential investigations pursuant to KSA 25-4165. Should I be articulating this differently? I move that the commission recess this open meeting with conflict counsel Jesse Burris present to discuss matters related to confidential investigations pursuant to KSA 25-4165 and KSA 25-4161 for good causes provided by KAR 1962. Justification for recess is so that the commission can exercise quasi-judicial functions when deliberating matters related to said confidential investigations as contemplated by KSA 75-4318G1. The open meeting shall be resumed here at 4:37. Do we want to say 4:50? 4:50 p.m.
Second.
Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of moving into recess session to deliberate?
Aye.
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 We would all have to work over the law.
Stream is live.
Thank you.
The commission requests more time, so I will read a motion to keep us going until 5. I move that the commission recess this open meeting with conflict counsel Jesse Burris present to discuss matters related to confidential investigations pursuant to KSA 254165 and KSA 254161 for good cause, as provided by KAR 1962. Justification for recesses so that the commission can exercise quasi-judicial functions when deliberating matters related to said confidential investigations as contemplated by KSA 754318 G1. The open meeting will be resumed here at 5 p.m.
Second.
Motion has been seconded.
Okay.
Yeah, we will be. Just live.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, it'll catch up. Yeah, there you go.
All right, thank you. Okay, upon deliberation, the commission has unanimously concluded that there has not been sufficient clear and convincing evidence establishing a violation as to counts 37 or 38.
I think there needs to be a motion and a vote.
Yeah, on the
Thank you,
record.
Jesus. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
would someone like to propose a motion to confirm the commission's conclusion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
So before us is a motion to conclude this hearing with a finding of insufficient, clear and convincing evidence as to counts 37 and 38, and therefore finding no violation. Any discussion on that motion?
Does the findings of fact in part of this motion?
Thank you. It's a good question. It's my understanding that Kansas Administrative Procedure Act, Mr. Burris, calls for or refers to findings of fact or conclusions of law. Can you help us understand how that's to be addressed?
I'm pretty sure in this context, there has to be some drafting of conclusions of law at least. Findings of fact, not as sure. I might need, I need to do more research, I guess. I really.
I think you could choose to adopt our stipulations and just fill in the blank, because the blank was what the money was spent on. And you could just say, you could probably fill it in with there's insufficient evidence to make a conclusion or something like that.
Okay.
At least as something to work off of, Jesse.
I think that makes sense. So that can be the first step towards findings of fact or conclusions of law for the purposes of the instant motion that Chairman Hale has proposed. Is there any further discussion before we memorialize that through a vote? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of Chairman Hale's motion to conclude this hearing with the finding of no violation of counts 37 and 38 based on lack of clear and convincing evidence? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, motion passes. The hearing is concluded.
Before we close the hearing, I think with one other, I would move that we would empower Commissioner Jackson, temporary chair, and Commissioner Jackson to review and execute that order on behalf of the commission as a whole.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of Commissioner Berger's motion? Aye. Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion passes. The Hearing no further discussion, we will now close this hearing. I will return the agenda back to Commissioner Hale.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Returning, I guess, Mr. Kisera, thank you for your time. You are welcome to stay through the end of our meeting, or you are welcome to depart.
I'm gonna go run like a gazelle set free. So, thank you. Can I look you? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All of you. Thank you. Is it okay if I go on the thank you?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, when you said all in favor, say aye. I say aye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Drive safe going home.
Returning to the agenda, given the time, 5:05, I would propose that we continue all remaining matters, including complaint 790, in the scheduled executive session and recess session until our meeting on November 20th. And if commissioners could maybe indicate, or if staff wants to tell us if there's perhaps cause, given the agenda of next month's meeting, to perhaps meet an hour early or whatever's necessary to accommodate the material in the agenda, considering what's being continued from this meeting.
May I?
Sure.
Complaint 790, I think we would request be moved to January because we already have 5 hearings scheduled for November.
Okay, that is also fine. And if, and for purposes of continuing any of these matters, whether to next month's meeting or until January, if we need a formal motion and an action, just let us know.
I think we would, at least for, I think we do for all of them, but complaint 790 would be, I guess, separate to be clean since it to move to January.
Okay. Well, let's first take a motion then regarding 790. If any commissioners could do us the honors of proposing to move that to January's meeting.
I move to continue complaint 790 to January session.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to continue complaint 790 to January 2025's meeting, signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. I'll now entertain a motion to continue.
Hold on first though. Caitlin, what's your thought on the one that I'm scheduled to be the presiding officer on? I think it'll be an evidentiary one. Have you heard from him at all?
Yes, and I think that it's 788. I think that, yes, but I think that we are going to potentially have some type of agreement. More so,
okay.
like, I don't think there will be factual disputes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to get my bearings for a second.
I will take a motion to continue the remaining matters on the agenda, including this month's executive session and recess session until our meeting in 4 weeks on November 20th. So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to continue the executive session and recess session on today's agenda to next month's meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. The next thing to indicate, just briefly, is that our next meeting will take place in exactly 4 weeks. And unless there are anything else to discuss, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any additional discussion?
Aye.
Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to adjourn, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. This concludes the October 23rd meeting of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Commissioner Jackson, thank you in particular for doing a wonderful job as hearing officer. And staff, thank you very much for all of the work that you put into today's meeting. Do not think for a second that it wasn't incredibly appreciated and productive, constructive for all of us. So thank you, everyone. I hope everyone enjoys their Halloween and has a good month. We'll see everybody again in 4 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Will you be there
Thanks.
in person, Chairman Hale, next time?